government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
Father, before I begin, bless me, Father, for I'm about to sin. America. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. One nation, indivisible, under God, for real. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. Senators here. Chuck, stand up, Chuck. Let him see you. Oh, God love you. What am I talking about? I tell you what, you're making everybody else stand up, though, pal. Thank you very, very much. I tell you what, stand up for Chuck. The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, from Charlotte, another line going from in Florida down to Tampa of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put the idea that Los Angeles and what am I doing here? For two reasons. One, you won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. Let's be clear. I hear it all the time. Cumulative, I can play for the programs many times over. Well, I'm sick and tired of smart guys. Let me start off with two words. Made in America. Made in America.
Oh, welcome back to another night of Shtick with Koolfrogg. You know, it's a good night. It's a good day. Didn't get a lot of time to do a lot of research, but I did get the chance to listen to a few things. I do have a little bit of, I guess you could call it pre-show that I'm going to throw up before I continue through the night. Watch Merrick Garland and his judiciary questioning and him lying through his teeth to another little bit that I'd like to cover, and maybe if I do it, it'll be a Rumble exclusive at the very, very end. Debating if I want to go that far. So first things first. So now the other night, I ran a Rumble exclusive where I spoke about the likeness of Russell Brand and a couple stories to go along with him and his ordeal. Now, figure, being that I made it a Rumble exclusive there, first article I should do here on YouTube should be in addition to Russell Brand. So if you're not following me at one place, you should be also following me at the other. You should be on that Rumble. You should be there and ready. I'm excited for this. So let's go ahead and talk about some Russell Brand here real quick. It says Rumble rejects UK Parliament's request to demonetize Russell Brand's content. Rumble rejects UK Parliament's request. Why would the Parliament be requesting that they demonetize him so badly? Why is it that this particular case that is centered around Russell Brand, why is this, what is this all of a sudden? So now, it's really disturbing to me, and I think that's the reason I wanted to bring it to this audience as well. Some of the thought to go along with it is now I get it. 16 years old nowadays is too young. It's too young. 16 back then was consensual. As long as you were 16 and you consented to it, you could be swept off your feet and travel down this long, dusty road of whatever you want it to be. Now, the accusation of essay and grape is just that. There's an allegation that it's there. There's nothing that's significantly there that is like, oh my, he did do this. There's nothing. This is all just allegation. They do not, in my opinion, have enough for this to even be a deal. But it's going to continue to make its way around all of these wonderful platforms that we're on, and all of us are going to be covering it like it's the best thing, because everybody's going to be wanting to know what happened to Russell Brand. And I hope it doesn't get all long drawn out, turned into something like some Johnny Depp thing or whatever. That's not necessary. That's not necessary. This is not that. This is something totally different. And I don't think that this should have anything to do with any of that. So, as far as allegations go, they're only in just those of allegations. And I don't see this turning into anything. I really don't. And for UK Parliament to go ahead and request Rumble to go ahead and do their job and demonetize him, and for them to turn around and say no, is awesome. It says, while Rumble obviously deplores essay, grape, and all serious crimes, believes that both alleged victims and the accused are entitled to full and serious investigation. It is vital to note that the recent allegations against Russell Brand have nothing to do with the content in Rumble's platform. Has nothing to do with it. So until you know for sure, demonetizing somebody for something is pretty strict and firm. And that's not something that most take light when it comes down to it. It's very disturbing to even catch a strike. Nonetheless, to be demonetized. To be demonetized would be horrible. Why? Because there's so many of us that do this. We do it off of the donations that we get from you, off the likes, off the clicks, off the views. The longer you watch, the better off it is. The more people are watching at one time, the better off it is. The more likes, the click rate is you can make a lot more money. And not a single person can ever assume that they're going to be the next hot thing to have 1.4 million followers. 1.4 million. I couldn't imagine trying to keep up with chat at 1.4 million. chat that I haven't talked to yet. So I think we kind of get the point on Russell Brand. Stop it. Just stop it. It's unnecessary. It's gone too far. And nothing of necessity. Nothing. So I think we need to go away from him and whatever they think that is. Speaking of chat, Suzanne was the first one here today. Says, hello, Koolfrogg. Good to see you, Suzanne. Glad you're here. Wendy G. Rumble's response was freaking awesome. I agree. 16 is associate of consent in many states as well as UK. It still is. It still is age of consent in many places. She's trying to go back on something that happened so many years ago, and trying to accuse him of doing it now. Why? Why now? What's now? You finally had the guts to get up and go out and do just that. Ellie Font, good to see you, dear. Glad you're here. Rose, good to see you. Raleigh Sport Raleigh. What's up, brother? Good to see you. Long time no see. I think I think I see you at times, but I don't know how long you hang out. So I want to be famous, but I'd love to financially pitch into help hubby without having to stop homeschooling. She probably wants a book deal, and the left wants to silence him. You know, the thing is he's been canceled from several different things. We went through this. What is this, last night or the night before that we went through this on Rumble? And there's like 5 or 6 different places that had stopped associating with him because of all of this. And he did have a book deal that was supposed to be coming up that was canceled. He did have lots of other dealings that were coming up that would have made him lots of money that were canceled. So if they're not giving it to him, sure as hell hope they're paying her. If that's the case, because somebody other than the people that were going to do it, that were already going to pay it out already anyway. Just pay it out. Give it to somebody else. Yeah, I mean, I don't see myself as being famous. I don't want to be famous. I just want to be some guy on YouTube that, has a fun time with his audience, and it brings you the latest and greatest news of the day. I mean, it sounds fun, right? Okay, so I do have a few other things to go along with the night before we move on to watching Oversight Committee. Everybody ready for that? That's exciting. It's super exciting. I like it when Congress is in session. It gives you so much more stuff to look at. Before we get there, this lady, Kirsten Sinema joins GOP senators on the bill to reverse Biden admin crackdown on school hunting and archery classes. being that we're kind of going to go into what Merrick Garland has to say and things that are along that line, figured, it's kind of a relevant story to, lead into potentially. Did you see Trudeau drug busts in India? Like, he got busted for shipping drugs to India? What's up? Senator Kirsten Sinema, late of Democrat Party, has split with Democrats she's still typical caucuses with to introduce new legislation that would permit the federal Department of Education to fund elementary and high school hunting archery programs, as reported by Fox News. Fuck Fox News. Senators John Cronin and Tom Tillis joined Sinema to sponsor a Protecting Hunting Heritage and Education Act. The new bill would seek to further clarify an existing statute that the Biden administration has construed to allow it to defund extracurricular programs that provide education in the lawful, responsible use of firearms such as target shooting, hunting, and archery. Conan told Fox News in a statement, educational enrichment programs like the hunting and archery are critical to our next generation's development and well-being, and this legislation would ensure they remain available in schools across the nation. School-based archery and hunting safety courses help Arizona students learn and grow while enjoying the outdoors. Cinema told the outlet Monday, we're ensuring the administration follows the law we wrote as Arizonans can continue to benefit from the educational courses. Tillis added, the Biden administration's partisan interpretation of the BSCA to eliminate hunting education in schools is a slap in the face to millions of Americans, particularly in rural areas, and discourages bipartisan cooperation with the Congress. Hunting education programs have wide bipartisan support in Congress. I encourage my colleagues to quickly pass legislation to ensure gun-grabbing Biden officials have no room for misinterpretation. Coming out from the left, Kristen Sinema for a potential win in Joe Biden's gun grabbing ordeals teach people to use them correctly. And they will have a tendency, I've been trained correctly. I lived in Minnesota. We couldn't do anything till we were 14. We had to go through classes. We had to go through classes, and then we had to be certified to be able to shoot a gun. It wasn't something that was just for anybody. So when you think about it, being trained properly on proper firearm safety is the best deal. Going along with this and going ahead and saying, well, let's go ahead and make things better by solidifying things to keep Joe Biden from taking your guns from you. Teach it correctly. Bring it into the school. Department of Education, it needs some of the stuff back. There's a lot of home economics courses, extracurricular courses, gun safety courses. Seriously, we had guns in the back windows of pickup trucks. Did you think we were scared? No. Nobody was scared. There's more people that were trained to do the right thing throughout the whole school, students alike, that drove around with that stuff. I didn't know how listen today. It's like, oh, you can't even go on property with that. You got to stay out of here. because gun safe zone is the place that is the best place for everybody. We've seen that over and over again fail. David asks, "Good to see you. Good to see you. Defund the Department of Education? Maybe we do need to defund the Department of Education. Department of Education has failed us over and over again. Or if you're unable to homeschool your own child, and you must put a child in school, pay attention to what is going on in your school, so that way you know for sure what your children are being forced to learn. If you don't like what is being forced to learn, you hit up parent-teacher conferences, you hit up the school board meetings, you get to know the superintendent, you get to know there's a lot of things that go along with both sides of that, and it's which beast do you wish to try to conquer? Because that homeschooling, ask Kelly. Homeschooling is one of the better things that's out there. Being able to teach your child correctly by yourself, as opposed to going ahead and having to pay somebody to do a half-ass job, or lie, or spread some transgenderism or something. Kristen Cinema, she had it right. Cinema said the Department of Education is wrongly interpreting the language of the bipartisan Safer Communities law. We're holding the administration accountable and ensuring they follow our law so students can continue to enjoy school-based hunting and archery programs in Arizona and across the country. Good. Teach them correctly. They won't grow up being so ignorant to the point. Ellie, I love homeschooling. There are good days and bad, but it is the best decision my husband and I ever made. During Koof, kids weren't behind like the other kids. And sadly, there's so many kids that are so far behind. They're so far behind, it's ridiculous. So, stop sharing this one. Because I'm happy that Kristen Cinema did that. I'm happy that she did that. The Democrat no more. Is she really a dino? I thought I had another article that kind of went along with that story, and maybe I didn't keep it. Went along with Baltimore school, the schools and the education levels that were being produced out of the Baltimore schools. They did a horrible job with the Baltimore schools, and it was such a great percentage of students that were failing basic math going into 8th grade again for a 4th year in a row. And it's so sad to see how dwindled or even trying to teach our children the right thing isn't even something that's thought of anymore. People don't care about any of that. So let me see what I got here. Didn't have a lot open. I'm just debating on what I want to do and what I don't want to do here. I think I'm going to get right into the Merrick Garland testimony, testifying in front of the Justice Department. I think we'll get into that. It could be a little lengthy for me to be wasting I don't want to be wasting too much time getting into it. So I think we'll get into that. And see how far we get before we decide to do the other thing, which was the Rumble exclusive. This isn't such a bad, deal for what this is, and I know that there's a lot of. It's not 5.5 hours long. I promise. It's not. There's lots of space in there. They got certain parts bookmarked for us, so we don't have to sit there and try finding bookmarks. It's good stuff. It really is. Let's go ahead. You should all be able to hear and see. Like, we need to get a really close-up picture of you. Can we get a picture of your nose hair, sir?
California to lead us all in the pledge. Would you please stand?
If you'll please face whichever flag is most appropriate for your direction. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Half the room is a little off, but okay. Good job. Good job being off sync.
Recognize himself for an opening
Glad
statement.
everybody could do
The
that.
fix is in. Even with the face-saving indictment last week of Hunter Biden, everyone knows the fix is in. 4.5 years. 4.5 years, the Department of Justice has been investigating Mr. Biden, an investigation run by David Weiss, an investigation that limited the number of witnesses agents could interview, an investigation that prohibited agents from referring to the president as the, quote, big guy in any of the interviews they did get to do.
The Judiciary Committee discussing his impeachment?
To interview Mr. Biden by giving the transit team secret a heads up. An investigation that notified Mr. Biden's defense counsel about a pending search warrant. An investigation run by Mr. Weiss, where they told Congress 3 different stories in 33 days. They told this committee on June 7th,
this is more about
David Weiss said, I have ultimate authority to determine when, where, and whether
Hunter
to bring
Biden's situation.
23 days later, June 30th, he told this committee, actually, I can only bring charges in my U.S. Attorney's District, the District of Delaware. And then to further confuse matters, on July 10th,
because this is what's gonna lead
Graham,
to.
I have not sought special counsel status. Rather, I've had discussions with the Department
Biden
of Justice.
impeachment.
An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that negotiated a plea deal that the federal district court declined
Getting
to
Merrick
accept.
Garland.
A plea deal so ridiculous, the judge asked
It's
this question.
It's a big deal.
Quote,
That's a big deal. That's a big hit.
Not to prosecute crimes that have nothing to do with the charges being diverted. The response from the DOJ lawyer, I'm not aware of any, Your Honor. A plea deal so ridiculous that the judge also asked, have you ever seen a diversion agreement where the agreement not to prosecute was so broad that it encompasses crimes in a different case?
Wouldn't that be an impeachable offense?
DOJ
Yes,
lawyer, no,
it
Your
totally
Honor,
would.
An
It totally
investigation
would
run
be
by
an
Mr. Weiss
impeachable
that not only
offense.
had a sweetheart deal rejected, but according to the New York Times, there was an
Hunter
even
Biden's
sweeter
done
deal, an earlier deal, a deal in
enough
which Mr.
with
Biden
the
would
big
not have to
guy,
plead guilty to anything. 4.5 years.
in my
and all
opinion, that
and
warrants
now we get a special counsel.
them
Now
at
we get a
least
special
doing the
counsel. And who does the
investigation.
Attorney General pick? David
Really
Weiss,
not
the guy
for
who
all
let all that
this
happen.
impeaching this
He could have
guy,
selected
impeaching
anyone.
that guy.
He could have picked
It
anyone.
it just
inside
starts setting
government,
a bad
outside
precedence,
government.
and they
He
go
could have
after
picked
each
former
other
attorney
over and
generals,
over again.
former
Oh, we need
special
to impeach
counsels,
this guy.
but
Oh, we
he
need to impeach
picks
that guy.
the one
And
guy,
when does it
he
stop?
knows will protect Joe Biden. He
When
picks
does it
David
stop?
Weiss.
It's never.
Here's what the AG said
It's never.
in his
If
August 11th
if that's when the
announcement
what the
of
actual
David Weiss
question
as
is,
a
it's
special
never.
counsel. Quote,
As sad as it
I
is.
am confident that Mr. Weiss will carry out his responsibility
So is there a
in
list
an
of what
even-handed
presidents
and
can
urgent
be
manner.
impeached for?
Urgent manner. Every witness we've talked to, the two FBI whistleblowers that came forward, Mr. Shapley,
misdemeanors
Mr.
and
Ziegler,
other
the two,
crimes.
FBI
Is
agents
enough.
on the case, Mr. Sobosinski, Ms. Holly, they've all said this thing
So
was anything
misdemeanors
but
and other
urgent.
crimes is
The
is
FBI
enough.
said this was they were frustrated at the pace.
Doesn't matter
Ms.
the
Holly
level
said she was
of
frustrated at the
crime.
pace. And of course, the
You just
IRS
have to
agents,
have
they
a
said the
majority of both
investigation
the
was
House
slow-walked and even-handed.
and the
They
Senate
limited the number of witnesses that could be interviewed. They tipped off
for
the defense
this
counsel about a
to
subpoena. The judge
full
says the plea deal was a joke,
be thing.
and all that's just half the
Now,
story.
for them to
One
wait
investigation protecting President Biden. There's another
better
one
part of
attacking
3
President Trump.
years.
Justice Department's got both sides of the equation covered.
Yeah, it's kind of
Look
disturbing.
at the classified
What's up,
documents
Keith Gregory?
case.
Good to see you, brother.
Spring
Good
and
to
early
see you.
summer of last year, the Department of Justice asked
Join us
President
for
Trump to turn
conversation.
over boxes of
I'll try talking to
documents.
Chad
He
as
does
much
just
as I
that.
possibly can.
In the process, President Trump finds 38 additional documents.
Got any
Tells
questions
the
about
Department of
this
Justice, very next day,
or
the FBI
anything
comes
else
to
that
his
we
home,
can
and
try
he turns
going
them
over?
Then the Department of Justice asked the president to put any boxes he brought from the White House
While he's
to
speaking.
his home in his storage room and secure it by locking it. He does that as well. Everything they asked him to do, he did. And then what's the Justice Department do? August 8th, last year, they raid President Trump's home. And according to the FBI agent, Stephen D'Antuono, the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, the search was a complete departure from standard protocol. When we interviewed Mr. D'Antuono, he said, first, the Miami field office
Now I
didn't do the
debated
search.
on
Instead, they
doing
sent folks
this
from DC.
here,
He said there was
or
no
if I
U.S.
should just
attorney
do it
assigned to
on
the
Rumble.
case. Instead, it was run by
If
DC.
this
in
seems like
particular,
it's
Jay
getting a
Bratt,
little,
who's now on the special counsel team. He said the
I
FBI
might
didn't
cut
get President Trump's
the
counsel's
YouTube side.
approval
Just
before
saying.
they did the search.
I might cut the YouTube side.
And then Mr. D'Antuono told us he had recommended that when the FBI got to Mr. Trump's
Although
home,
inappropriately, you
President
said
Trump's
good evening
home,
to
contact his
you.
counsel, wait for him to get there and do
Good
the search
evening to
together.
you. Good to see you over on
Of
that
course, the
Rumble
DOJ said no.
side.
And then who does the Attorney General name as special counsel in that case? Jack Smith, the guy who a few years ago was looking for ways to prosecute Americans, targeted by Lois Lerner and the IRS, looking to prosecute the very victims of the weaponized government, the weaponized IRS. Jack Smith, the guy who prosecuted Governor McDonald, only to have the Supreme Court
Whatever you do,
overturn that prosecution in a
hit the
unanimous
like
decision.
button.
That's the guy.
Share
That's
this
the
out
guy
to
that
those
the
places
Attorney
you
General of the United States
like to
selects
share things.
as special counsel.
Let all your friends
You
know
wonder why
where
4
you're
out of 5
hanging out.
Americans believe there are now
Yeah,
two
we can
standards of
maybe
justice.
create more
regarding rape.
conversation.
Mr. Garland, I anticipate a number of questions on these two investigations. Later in the hearing, I expect from Republicans, you will also get questions about the many other concerns the American people have with the department. The school board's memorandum, treating Catholics, the memo that said pro-life Catholics are extremists, the Fifth Circuit decision, great decision, on the Department of Justice and other agencies censoring American speech, and of course the FISA law that's up for reauthorization this year, and how that process has been abused and infringed on the rights, privacy rights of the American people. Americans believe that today in our country, there is unequal application of the law. They believe that because there is.
And Jim
Republicans
Jordan's
committed-
not lying to
committed
us.
to making that change.
He's really
With
not.
that, I would yield to the gentleman from New York, the ranking member, for an opening
He's
statement.
really got a point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
He's
Chairman,
making it what it
at
is.
the outset, let me make two comments. One, just about every assertion you made in your opening statement has been completely refuted by witnesses who have testified before this committee. Two, far from being favored, many commentators have noted that people accused of simple gun possession while under the influence of a drug, when that gun was not used in the commission of a crime, are rarely, if ever, prosecuted the way Hunter Biden is being prosecuted. Mr. Chairman, one of this committee's most important duties
Doesn't
is
matter.
conducting oversight
Doesn't
of the
matter.
Department of Justice.
Doesn't
We are called upon
make
to
it
ensure that
make
the
it a
DOJ
point
uses the enormous amount of
to
power
put it
is
out there to
granted
let people
in
know
a fair,
exactly
just manner that respects the civil and
exactly
human
what the
rights of
kind
all
of stuff that
Americans.
Hunter Biden did.
The Attorney General of the United States oversees issues that affect the lives of each and every American. Violent crime, drug trafficking, attacks on our civil rights, threats to our national security, and environmental crimes all fall under his purview. That is why we regularly request that he or she appear before this committee to speak about the work the department is doing for the welfare of the country. This is how we ensure that the department stays accountable to the American people. But if we're up to the Republicans, Americans would hear nothing about any of these substantive issues today. They would hear nothing about the rise in domestic terrorism and what the Justice Department is doing about it. They would hear nothing about what the department is doing to stop hate crimes and prevent gun violence. They would hear nothing about how the department is disrupting efforts by Russia, China, and others to interfere in our elections. Extreme MAGA Republicans have poisoned our vital oversight work. They've ignored our legitimate oversight responsibilities and used their power to
projecting
stage
just a
one
little bit.
political stunt
Okay.
after another. They have wasted countless taxpayer dollars on baseless investigations into President Biden and his family, desperate to find evidence for an absurd impeachment and desperate to distract from the mounting legal peril facing Donald Trump. They have fought tirelessly to stop efforts to fight malign foreign actors trying to influence and manipulate Americans through social media. They have unconstitutionally interfered in criminal litigation and attempted to bully state and local law enforcement officers.
No, you're
They
not
have
wrong, Ellie.
publicized the names of witnesses
You're not wrong.
who did not further their political goals, leading to threats of death and physical
The-
violence against those witnesses
The
and their
bad
families.
laws
They have caused any number of private
that they've
institutions
created
and companies
for
millions of dollars in legal fees.
school
They struggle
zones
to respond to ridiculous and overbroad requests
are
for information
horrible.
and transcribed interviews.
They
They have issued subpoenas for show without making meaningful attempts to get the
takes
information they seek by consent.
upstanding
They've let
citizens
low, baseless
like
personal
yourself
attacks on any prosecutor to bring charges against
who
Donald Trump or
could
January
potentially
6th
be a
rioters.
good thing
They have attempted to discredit
to
investigators who are
have
not
just in
hard enough
case
on
somebody
Donald Trump's
decides
political
to
opponents.
go
They have
insane.
supported those involved in the deadly attack
To
on our
take it
Capitol
away
on
from
January
you,
6th in an attempt to overthrow a lawful
because
election.
that person
They
that's
have justified
insane
conduct that we all know to be wildly
is
illegal,
okay no
like the
matter
theft of
what,
classified materials and incitement
because
to
they said
violence.
so. They said so.
Through it
It's
all,
okay.
rather
It's
than
okay.
trying to unite
I don't
the
see.
country
I
or
wish
solve the
that you
problems that affect
and
us
or
all,
I
they have sought to
should have
exploit our divisions for cynical, personal,
the
political
know
gain.
with all
That is
for
their
our
goal.
own weapon
Division. They want to divide this country and make our government
to
appear
use
like
it
it's
wisely.
broken, because that is when their broken political party
Gun-free zones are
thrives.
horrible.
So today, I implore
It's
the public to see
anything
through the
that goes
sham.
against
I have no doubt that you will
the
hear a
initial
deluge of conspiracy theories and
initial
baseless
thought
accusations.
of any
They will
2A
quote freely from so-called
anything
whistleblowers who have been broadly
is
discredited or
immediately a
contradicted.
violation of
They will
2A.
viciously attack federal law enforcement.
This shall not be
They will tell you that
infringed.
all 91 criminal charges against Donald Trump are part of a conspiracy,
They don't care.
despite overwhelming evidence of each of Donald Trump's crimes. And they will attack Special Counsel Weiss, who was appointed, let us not forget, by Donald Trump, for not being hard enough on Hunter Biden. Republicans will continue doing what they've done for years, discrediting anyone who does not serve their political goals at any cost. And the shame of it is that in this hearing room, like on the House floor, where we are barreling towards a government shutdown while my Republican colleagues call each other names, we could be working together to put people over politics and to solve any number of problems
Yeah,
affecting the
yeah,
American
it's the
people.
Republicans that calling each other
More than
names.
30,000
That's where the issue is.
Americans have died
He's just trying to point
from
fingers
gun
at a
violence
couple
so far
of
this year alone.
hot-headed women
Guns have become the leading cause of death for children aged 1 to 17, surpassing
that
car
can't leave
accidents.
each other alone.
Domestic violent extremism and white nationalism are on the rise. We are seeing active
That's
clubs
Boobert.
and other white
Marjorie
supremacist
Taylor
groups
Greene.
pop up around the country. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. Malign foreign actors like Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are attempting to influence our elections. Political rhetoric is causing
Y'all
threats
bump
against
that
law
like
enforcement
button.
officials to skyrocket.
I'll try making
Our
it as
immigration
exciting
court
as I
system is
possibly
in
can.
desperate need of reform.
I mean,
Our
it's
election
Gerald
workers receive
Mandler.
death threats
I
from
can only do
conspiracy
so much.
theory-driven extremists.
I think
Fentanyl
there
is
was a
filling our
video I
streets and
saw
poisoning our
the other
children
day
at historic rates.
with
This list
Colin
goes
Moore
on and on.
talking
We, the
about
people in
how
this room,
Biden
are in a
fighting
position to do something about it.
for Hunter
In
to
fact,
have
it is our
his
duty
2A
to do
rights
something about it.
will actually
Consistent with the
help
oath we
everyone
took when we were
else.
sworn in as members of
The
Congress.
question is,
We could work with
will
the Department of
he?
Justice and Attorney General Garland to
That's
address
a
any
good
number of
question.
real
It's a good
substantive
question.
problems facing the American people. Instead, House
Because I mean,
Republicans will
you
use
have a
their time
point. You
today
have a point.
to talk about long discredited conspiracy
Yeah,
theories and Hunter
if that's
Biden's
where they're
laptop.
going to go, it
They
could
will do
help a
it
lot of other
because they
people
care more about Donald
when it
Trump
comes to these
than they
types of
do about their
really
own constituents. I hope my
um
colleagues will see reason and at least attempt
goes
to
totally
work with the Attorney
against
General in good faith.
his own
Sadly, on the other side of the aisle, reason and good faith seem to
1988,
be in short supply.
1994
In any event, Mr. Attorney General, I thank you for your testimony.
drug and crime
and thank you in
bills
advance for your patience.
that Joe
I yield back.
Biden put on
Gentleman
the
yields back
books.
without objection. All other opening statements will be included in the record. We will
Those
now
are Joe
introduce today's
Biden's
witness,
big,
the Honorable Merrick Garland.
adventures in
He's
trying
the Attorney
to
General of the United States.
get
He was
things
sworn in on March
passed.
11th, 2021. We welcome our witness. Thank him for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in.
Yeah, he could
Please rise
do
and
one
raise your right
last
hand.
thing, and
You
he
swear
can go
affirm under
ahead
penalty of
and
perjury,
pack
penalty
the
of
Supreme
perjury that the
Court as
testimony
he
you're about
wishes
give
to
is true
do
and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief. So help you God.
to make it
The record
his.
show that the witness is answered in the affirmative. Thank you.
As that's the only thing he has
know that your written
left.
testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony. You know how this is done, Mr. Garland. You've been here before. We want to again thank you for being here. You're welcome to give your opening statement.
I'm sorry, is this working? Yeah,
You got it.
thank you. Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the more than 115,000 employees of the Department of Justice. Since the Justice Department was founded, it has been tasked with confronting some of the most challenging issues before the country. Today, we are handling matters of significant public interest that carry great consequences
Weaponized by
for
both
our
sides.
democracy. A lot has been said about the Justice Department, about who we are and what we are doing, about what our job is and what it is not, and about why we do this
The
work.
exciting part is
I
watching
want to
them.
provide some clarity. First, who we are.
Watching meetings is
Justice
when they get
Department is made
excited
up
for
of more
lunch
than
break.
115,000 men and women who work in
There's a
every
couple
state
breaks.
and
There's a couple
communities
breaks
across
that
the
we'll be able to
country
skip
and
over.
around the globe.
So
They are
this is not as
FBI,
long as they
DEA,
expect it to be.
ATF agents and United States Marshals who risk their lives to serve their communities.
He does
They
say
are prosecutors
a
and
few
staff
interesting
who work
things.
tirelessly to enforce our laws. The overwhelming majority are career public servants, meaning that they were not appointed by the president of any party. Second, I want to provide clarity about what the job of the Justice Department is and about what it is not. Our job is to help keep our country safe. That includes working closely with local police departments and communities across the country to combat violent crime. In fact, today, we are announcing the results of a recent U.S. Marshals operation conducted with state and local law enforcement. That operation
today.
targeted violent fugitives and resulted in 4,400 arrests across 20 cities in just 3 months. Our work also
But yet
includes
you had
combating the
somebody
drug
like
cartels
this
that are poisoning
Cavalcante dude
Americans. Last
that
Friday,
ran around
we extradited
Pittsburgh
Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a leader of the
for
Sinaloa cartel, from
12
Mexico
days.
to the United States. He is a son of El Chapo and one of more than a dozen cartel members.
Luckily, just
we
trying
have
to survive
indicted
as
and
opposed to trying
extradited
to
the United States. Our job
unalive
includes
more.
seeking justice for the survivors of child exploitation, human smuggling, and sex trafficking. And it includes protecting democratic institutions like this one by holding accountable all those criminally responsible for the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Our job is also to protect civil rights. That includes protecting our freedoms as Americans to worship and think as we please, and to peacefully express our opinions, our beliefs, and our ideas. It includes protecting the right of every eligible citizen to vote and to have that vote counted. It includes combating discrimination, defending
Yeah. Do you
reproductive
get to
rights
choose
under
who
law, and deterring and prosecuting
is
attacks
deceased or not?
such as hate crimes. And our job is to uphold the rule of law. That means we apply the
Voter
same
rolls
laws to everyone.
check.
There is not one set of laws for the powerful and another for the
Just want to be
powerless.
sure. Want to be
One
sure
for the
everybody's being
rich,
safe.
Another for the poor, one for Democrats and another for Republicans, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity or religion. Our job is to pursue justice without fear or favor. Our job is not to do what is politically convenient. Our job is not to take orders from the president, from Congress, or from anyone else about
Just
who
so everybody
or
knows,
what
I won't
to
stop bringing you this
investigate.
type of content. If
As the
anything
president
happens
himself
to
has
this
said, and
YouTube
I
channel, be
reaffirm
sure to
today,
check out
I am
Rumble.
not the president's
Rumble's a
lawyer.
great place to go.
I will
You
add,
might
I am
find
not
yourself interested in
Congress's
doing that at some
prosecutor.
point in time.
The Justice Department works for the American people. Our job is to follow the facts and the law, and that is what we do. All of us recognize that with this work comes public scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate oversight. These are appropriate and important given the matters and the gravity of the matters that are before the department. But singling out individual career public servants who are just doing their jobs is dangerous.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to assume that both sides are only telling the truth.
We will not be intimidated. We will do our jobs free from outside influence, and we will not back down from defending our democracy.
With whatever YouTube tells us that we must agree with.
Our job in this way. The Justice Department was founded in the wake of the Civil War and in the midst of Reconstruction with the first principal task of bringing to justice white supremacists and others who terrorize Black Americans to prevent them from exercising their civil rights. The Justice Department's job then and now is to fulfill the promise that it is at the foundation of our democracy, that the law will treat each of us alike. That promise is also why I am here. My family fled religious persecution in Eastern Europe at the start of the 20th century.
Oh, no.
My grandmother was
We have to hear your personal story?
born in what is now Belarus.
Are we supposed to feel sorry for you?
As did two of her siblings.
Because
The
I
other
would
two did
almost
not.
assume
Those two were killed in the
that a
Holocaust.
majority of people
And there,
that
little
live
doubt
here in this
that
wonderful,
but for America, the same thing would have happened to my grandmother.
wonderful United States
This
of
country took her
America.
in and under the
Is he
protection
gonna? It kind of does sound like he's gonna cry.
of our laws.
You can.
She was able to live without fear of persecution. That protection is what distinguishes this country from so many others. The protection of
I
law,
just.
the rule of law, is the foundation
know.
of our system of government. Repaying this country for the debt my
Telling
family
your own
owes,
personal story. I mean, we all have personal stories.
for our
We all
very
come from
lives,
somewhere.
has been the
We all
focus
had
of my entire
relatives at some
professional
point in
career.
time
That is why I
potentially
served in the Justice
that
Department under 5 different attorneys
tumbled
general,
out of different
under both
countries.
Democratic
You
and
know,
Republican
I'm mainly
administrations.
Polish.
That is why I spent more
Mainly
than
Polish.
25 years
So
ensuring
I'm
the rule
mainly
of law
Polish.
as a judge. And that is why I left a lifetime appointment as a
Okay,
judge
so it's
and came back to the
I'm
Justice Department
like
2.5 years
75%
ago.
Polish. So
That is why I'm here today.
being as much as I
look forward to your
am,
questions.
though I'm
Thank you,
from
Mr.
the
Attorney General.
United
You were right.
States of
America is
America,
the greatest country
people
ever. And
ask me, what,
we on this side, I know, are very
or
concerned
you're
about
just
the
white?
equal
No, I'm not
application of
just
the law that
white.
you talked about in your opening statement. With that, we'll
Excuse
move
me.
5-minute questions, and we will start with the gentleman
It's
from
more
Louisiana,
than
Mr.
that.
Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The rule of law
Just
does
like it mattered where he came
distinguish our
from.
country, but you have not
I think it matters
upheld
where
that.
all of
You
us
have
come
allowed the
from.
rule of law to erode, and that's why 65% of the people in this country have no faith in the Department of Justice under your leadership. They don't trust it. They don't trust you. The reason is because they're witnessing every day a politicized Justice Department and a two-tiered system of justice. For example, they see the DOJ, of course, aggressively prosecuting President Biden's chief political rival, Mr. Trump, while at the same time, they see slow walking and special treatment given to the president's son. That's just a fact that everybody can see with their own two eyes. I want to focus on that investigation of the Biden family. We have many important questions for you today about that. Let me just get right to the chase. Has anyone from the White House provided direction at any time to you personally or to any senior officials at the DOJ regarding how the Hunter Biden investigation was to be carried out?
No.
Have you had personal contact with anyone at FBI headquarters about the Hunter Biden investigation?
I don't recollect the answer to that question, but the FBI works for the Justice Department. It's.
I'm sorry.
agents
You don't
of ours.
recollect. You don't recollect whether you've talked with anybody at FBI headquarters about an investigation of the president's son?
I don't believe that I did. I promised the Senate when I came before it for confirmation that I would
You
leave Mr. Weiss
promised.
in place and that I would not interfere with his investigation.
Okay. Did you
Oh,
ever?
so
I have kept that promise.
okay.
All right.
Because if
Have
you
had
tell them
personal
that you
contact
actually
with anybody
do
at the
talk to them
Baltimore field
about it,
office on the Hunter Biden matter?
it interferes with it.
On July 10th, 2023, U.S. Attorney David Weiss told Senator Lindsey Graham, quote, I had discussions with departmental officials regarding potential appointment under 28 U.S.C. Section 515, which would have allowed me to file charges in a district outside my own without the partnership of the local U.S. attorney, end quote. With whom did Mr. Weiss have those discussions?
I'm not going to get into the internal deliberations of the department.
Oh, but you must, sir. This is important for us. We have oversight responsibility over your department, and we need these answers.
As appropriate and necessary for Mr. Weiss to have conversations with the department. I made clear that if he wanted to bring a case in any jurisdiction, he would be able to do that. The way you do that is to get an order signed by the Attorney General called a 515 order. I promised he would be able to do that, and he in his letters made clear he understood he would be able to do that.
Okay. Can you tell us about any briefings or discussions that you personally have had with Mr. Weiss regarding any and all federal investigations of Hunter Biden?
I'm going to say again, I promised the Senate that I would not interfere with Mr. Weiss.
So you have not, I'm just under oath today, your testimony is you have not had any discussions with Mr. Weiss about this matter?
Under oath, my testimony today is that I promised the Senate I would not intrude in his investigation. I do not intend to discuss the internal Justice Department deliberations, whether or not I had them.
Oh, okay. So your testimony today is you're not going to tell us whether you've had discussions with Mr. Weiss.
My testimony today is I told the committee that I would not interfere. I made clear that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring cases that he thought were appropriate.
Okay.
Mr. Weiss's
All right.
letter.
Okay, let me
you
stop you.
makes
For a second
clear-
time, sir. Are you aware that FBI officials have come before this committee and they have stated that there was a cumbersome bureaucratic process that Mr. Weiss had to go through to bring charges in another judicial district? You know that?
I'm not aware, but that's not true. There's nothing cumbersome about the process.
So those
All I
whistleblowers
give
are
you-
lying to us under oath? Those whistleblowers are lying?
I
Is
can
that your
say
testimony?
that. Their description of the process is cumbersome is an opinion. It's not a fact question. All I have to do is
Okay,
sign a
all right,
section.
let me get to the fact. Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter
Hope
Biden
you don't
case
take
since
those sounds
2018,
wrong.
correct?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Weiss has been the lead prosecutor on the Hunter Biden case since 2018. Now, here's the question.
He's been the lead prosecutor since he was appointed by President Trump.
Okay,
And
why,
assigned-
let me ask you, why has the Justice Department dragged this investigation out for so long? Does it really take years to determine if Hunter Biden lied on a federal form related to purchasing a firearm?
Mr. Weiss was a long-time career
No,
prosecutor.
I don't.
Trump
I
appointed him
I don't
as
You're not
purr.
answering the question. Is that standard procedure? Should it take that long to
And I
make
don't
such a
even want to
simple information?
attempt.
I'm answering the question.
I can roll
Give
my
me an
tongue,
opportunity to do so.
Okay.
but
He was charged with that
I don't.
investigation under the previous administration. He's continued.
I
He
don't want to
knows how to
sound
conduct
stupid.
investigations,
Trying
and
to
I have
start it
not
off to
intruded
get
or
somewhere
attempted to
to
evaluate that
sound okay. I
because
just
that was the promise I made to the Senate.
The whistleblowers gave us
no,
testimony about serious
not going to do
misconduct
it.
at the Justice Department in regards to the preferential treatment afforded Hunter Biden. Has your office requested an investigation
Yes,
into that?
over there on the Rumble side.
There
Anything
are
ever happens
well-known
here
processes for
on
how
YouTube
whistleblowers make their
will always
claims.
still
I am
be
a strong
over on
proponent of
Rumble.
whistleblowers and a strong defender. We have an Inspector General's office. We have an Office of Professional Responsibility. That is the way in which complaints from whistleblowers should be and are appropriately handled.
I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Nadler. Okay, Dan.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being here today. It's no secret that some of my colleagues across the aisle have threatened to shut down the government unless and until the FBI and the Department of Justice are defunded. One Trump-light presidential candidate has said that we should abolish the FBI
I don't think anybody
altogether.
wants it defunded.
Mr.
They
Attorney
just
General,
want it to
what would be the
be
impact on
a
America
little
of defunding
smaller,
the FBI?
less overreach.
Defunding the
Less
FBI would leave the
overreach.
United States naked.
Stop trying to
the
push new laws and
malign influence of the Chinese Communist
create
Party,
things that don't need to be
the
created.
attacks by Iranians on American citizens and attempts to
Leave our
assassinate
2
former
a.m.
officials,
And if
to
this whole
the
thing with
Russian
Hunter Biden
aggression,
turns out to be
to
something
North Korean cyber
that helps
attacks,
us,
to violent crime in the
good.
United States, which the FBI helps to fight against, to all kinds of espionage, to domestic violent
I mean,
extremists.
I'm in
who
South
have,
Dakota, so
attacked our churches, our synagogues,
constitutional
our
carry.
mosques, and who have killed individuals out of racial hatred. I cannot imagine the consequences of defunding the FBI, but they would be catastrophic.
Thank you. I want to turn to Mr. Weiss's investigation and the authority he's been granted to conduct that investigation without interference in whatever way he deems necessary. You testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee on March 1st of this year that David Weiss had, quote, full authority over any investigation concerning Hunter Biden. Was that a true statement at the time?
Yes, Mr. Weiss has full authority to conduct his investigation however he wishes, and Mr. Weiss has confirmed that in letters to this committee.
Thank you. This authority included ensuring that Weiss would be able to bring charges in jurisdiction outside of Delaware if necessary. Is that correct?
I assured Mr. Weiss publicly that he would have the authority to bring a case outside of Delaware if he thought that was appropriate.
Does that remain true today?
Yes, that is true today.
Has it ever been the case over the course of this investigation that Mr. Weiss would not have been able to bring charges outside of Delaware if warranted?
As a matter of my authority, I promised he would be able to do that. I think as is apparent in the letters exchanged with the committee and in my last previous testimony, in order for a United States attorney or a special counsel or anyone else to bring a case outside of his jurisdiction, it requires me to sign a paper called Section 515. That's the statute which permits bringing cases outside of the jurisdiction. I promised that I would do whatever was required.
So anything that
Mr. Weiss
went and changed jurisdictions would come across your desk.
And I assume it was your understanding that Mr. Weiss was fully aware that he could bring charges outside of Delaware if necessary when you testified on March 1st.
Mr. Weiss has said so in the letters he sent to this committee.
Thank you. Did he ever say or do anything? Did he ever say or do anything that might make him unsure of where he could bring charges?
Mr. Weiss's own letters reflect that he had never asked me to be special counsel and that he understood the process for asking for a signature on a Section 515 form.
Okay.
There have been accusations that the handling of the Hunter Biden matter
Thank you
is
for
an example of
being
a two-tiered system of justice.
so
What's your response
confident
to that allegation?
and directing
Justice
in
Department
which
treats
way and which
everyone
bill,
alike, regardless of party, regardless
what
of
you
ethnicity,
wouldn't sign.
regardless of wealth.
It's very
Everyone is treated alike. I
specific.
understand that people may not understand why particular investigations are conducted in particular ways until all the facts come out. That's what we have a court for. And all of the explanations will come out with respect to Mr. Weiss, for example, at the end of his period as special counsel. One of the requirements is that he file a report, which I have promised to make public to the extent that's lawful and consistent with
Do you
department
just
policy.
know the
It will
questions that he's
explain
going to
his
ask?
decisions to prosecute and not to prosecute.
Thank you. What are the impacts of members of Congress making such
Good,
accusations
good
against
to know that you
DOJ?
weren't
Do
scripted or
baseless
anything.
accusations from government officials make it more difficult for investigators to do their job and effectively investigate the subject?
Members of the Justice Department are strong and tough and able to understand that their job is to do the right thing regardless of any pressures from any quarter. What is dangerous, and I'm not talking about the committee, but what is dangerous is when anyone singles out a career prosecutor or a career FBI agent, and we know as a matter of fact that that kind of singling out has led to threats. This is a concern across the board. It's not a concern
That's
about
led to
anyone in
threats.
particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would have been justified in referring to the committee. My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Attorney General, you're
Gonna
the
smile
only
at
person who could
your
ensure
friend that's
that
sitting
Mr.
next to
Weiss
you.
had all the necessary authority, aren't you?
I'm the only person who can sign an agreement with respect to special counsel. The authority to do Section 515 can be signed by other people in the department.
You're aware, ultimately, though, the authority is yours.
Yes.
You made the point that you don't take orders from the president about such things. You decide ultimately what the Justice Department will do.
I announced at the beginning, I promised that he would be able to bring whatever cases he wants, and I have followed through on that promise. I'm permitted to make that kind of promise, and I have made it.
Did you undertake to inform yourself, to interact with him sufficient to ensure that he knew he possessed that authority, or that you would see to it that he had all necessary
I
authority?
don't think there's any doubt that he knew. He has written 3 letters to this committee indicating that he understood he had that authority.
You're also aware, though, aren't you, sir, that a senior IRS investigator, whistleblower, came forward and testified publicly that Mr. Weiss stated that he did not have such authority. He was not the decider. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of the testimony. I was not present at any point during that statement. And
Have you
Mr. Weiss, who was present, has indicated that he had the authority and he knew that he had it.
Subsequent to those developments, though,
So-
you decided to make Mr. Weiss special counsel, which you had not done before.
Mr. Weiss made clear he did not ask me to be special counsel until last month. And last month, I made him special counsel.
Did you have some lack of information that you should have had that would have caused you to act earlier to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss did not ask to be special counsel before.
I understand he didn't ask. You said that, sir. Did you take the necessary steps to
So
inform
just
yourself?
because he
what
asked, you're
authority
like,
he
yeah,
understood he
you know,
had, or what
that sounds like a
obstacles he
wise
was encountering?
idea that you
Mr.
should
Weiss
be
had, as I said from the beginning, at the
Mr.
very
Weiss,
beginning, that he had authority over
special
all matters
counsel.
that pertain
Yes,
to
you
under
should
five.
be.
Have you?
Yes, Mr. Weiss.
Have you?
Mhm.
Have you learned?
I don't think that he was really
in
thinking.
fact deterred by decisions of the
I think he
United
was
States
politically
attorneys in the
motivated
District of Columbia and the Northern District of California from
from
proceeding as he thought
side
best.
to side.
With respect,
I think there's something
Congressman,
more to it.
Mr. Weiss has not said that he was deterred. He said that he followed the normal processes of the department, and that he was never denied the ability to bring a case in another jurisdiction.
Well, what changed then, Mr. Attorney General? What made you decide that it was sufficient to leave him in the situation he was until you decided to make him special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked for that authority, given the extraordinary circumstances of this matter, and given my promise that I would give him any resources he requested, I made him special counsel.
So until that time, was it just a matter of his predilection, or did you undertake to investigate and discern what he was doing with his authority and whether he faced any obstacles?
I did not endeavor to investigate because I had promised that I would not interfere with this investigation. The way to not interfere is to not investigate an investigation.
Once he requested to be named special counsel, having not done so over months and months of your tenure, did you ask him what had changed that made him now need to be a special counsel?
Mr. Weiss asked to be made special counsel. I had promised that I would give him all the resources
So
he needed.
you
I
don't
made him special
ask any
counsel.
questions. You don't just
When
be
did
like,
the
well, I don't know
Justice
why.
Department permit
I decided
statutes of
to-
limitations to expire on some of the prospective charges against Hunter Biden for tax
Why I
violations?
shouldn't give you this?
I don't know anything about the statute of
Nothing. There's no
limitations here. The
conflicting
investigation was
anything
in
or
the
other.
hands of Mr. Weiss to make the determinations that he thought were appropriate.
Are you unaware that statutes of limitations have in fact been allowed to expire after there having been tolling agreements in place?
I'm going to say again, determination of where to bring cases and which kinds of cases to bring was left to Mr. Weiss.
Yes, sir. I understand that you've said that. That's part of the problem. The question is, are you aware that statutes of limitations have been allowed to expire while the matter was under investigation?
The investigators were fully familiar with all the relevant law.
I'm not asking for the excuses. I'm
They-
asking whether you're aware of that fact, sir.
I'm going to say again. I'm going to say again and again if necessary. I did not interfere with, did not investigate, did not
See,
make
those are
determinations.
statements in response to other questions.
Those-
Everybody in the country now knows who's paying attention to this, that the Justice Department permitted statutes of limitations to expire.
Everybody
lawyer who's
paying
ever
attention
practiced
now.
understands the
Oh,
implications
oh,
of
okay.
allowing statutes of limitations
Not
to
interested
expire.
in
Do you
this
not even know as
particular
you sit here whether they're confirmed or
information.
not?
Prosecutors make appropriate determinations on their own. In this case, I left it to Mr. Weiss whether to bring charges or not.
This is
That would
kind of
include
important. If
whether
you
to
haven't
let
heard
statute of
this
limitations
or hadn't
expire
listened to
or
any
not,
of
whether
this,
there was sufficient evidence to bring a case that was subject to the statute of limitations or not, whether there were better cases to bring or not.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General, for being
I really
here
think
with us
that
this morning.
getting
You know, as
Merrick
much
Garland
as
right
we
there in front of
see
them
dirt being thrown in the air, there's a lot of
is huge. And it could really be something if they can get the
misinformation
right
that I think is
questions at them
intended to confuse people. I would like to ask
to
unanimous
get people
consent
to wake up
put
to the
into record 3
situation.
letters from Mr. Weiss
What
that
is
he sent to
exactly going
Congress
on
June 7th, June
with
30th,
Mr. Weiss?
and July 10th.
Hunter Biden.
Without objection.
He said
Can we
over and
rate
over
you?
again that he has full
Says
authority over this
Chloe.
case, including the ability to seek special counsel or
Okay,
special attorney status if needed.
go for it. I'm not going to tell you no.
Trying to imply otherwise is just simply false.
Got mods.
Mr. Weiss was appointed
Mods
by
be
then
ready.
President Trump. Your decision was to leave the Trump-appointed attorney completely in charge of this, hands off from you.
Sure I
He
can.
makes all the calls without interference.
Should be able to be
from the
rated
Attorney General. Is that correct?
right away.
That is correct.
And so the idea that you would interfere is completely wrong. And I'd also like to ask,
I
you
am.
talked about
I have it set to everybody.
your independence from the president, but also your
Hold on.
independence from the Congress. Have you ever come across historically an instance where the Congress of the United States tried to or successfully interfered with a prosecution initiated by the Department of Justice based on the facts and the law?
I want to be gentle about the word interfere, but it is just as a
And that's what
historical example
everybody's-
in the case of Iran-Contra, the consequences of actions by the
Okay,
Congress
so-
were that the special counsel's investigation of
How
Iran,
do I get here to change
Mr. North were dismissed.
that
Correct.
setting?
Before I go into
So I
another
believe that you
question I
should be
have, I
able
just
to.
would like unanimous consent to put into the record the annual statistical transparency report
Well, yeah, I'll
dated
take a
April
raid.
of 2023. It indicates
Let's see
that
if
the
I can't.
deduplicated counting method for FBI
All
queries
channels
of
can
U.S.
redirect to my
persons
content.
under the Section 702
Safe.
database numbered over
Go for it.
119,000. I would just like to note, and we will work with you.
I don't know why that was
This committee on a
deselected.
bipartisan basis is
Shouldn't have
very
been
concerned
deselected.
about querying of the 702 database
Thank you,
for
YouTube.
U.S. persons without a warrant. We're not suggesting that the law does not permit that, but we are going to visit this issue.
It seems
because
that
it
that
is
was on my
view
end potentially.
that
So
querying the
hopefully that works
702
itself out and
database
you can
that has
get
been
that
collected
raid.
without
I'll take a
due
raid.
process because it relates to
We're
foreign
watching
individuals is completely wrong in terms of the
Merrick
privacy
Garland
rights of
testimony.
Americans. And I'm hoping that we can work
Good to see you,
successfully
Marv.
with you as we craft requirements for a warrant.
He should be able to
do
try that again.
querying. I'd like to ask, as we know, and has been mentioned by the ranking member, the proposal is basically to
Everybody here.
defund the police by the Republicans, to defund the FBI.
That's the way to do it.
I
That's the way to do it.
am concerned that if we defund the police, as the majority has suggested, that really doesn't have an
I know that there's
impact
others that are
on the
watching.
statute of limitations. So if we were to
This lady
defund
will
the
ramble.
Department of Justice,
This is Ms. Lofgren.
defund
Ms.
the
Lofgren
FBI and the
has
police,
no
as has been
problem.
suggested, what would happen with the statute of limitations for cases that you were pursuing if you were not
Filling
able
her
to
5
actually
minutes
do
with
that?
a
Would
whole
they
bunch
be
of
suspended
nonsense
anyway, or would the criminals get
before
off scot-free?
asking any kind of question.
Well, I know in my experience as a judge, if I was asked a legal question that I don't know the answer, I would go back to the office and study it, and I'll have to do that in this case. I don't have the answer.
Well, I think I do, because there's nothing in the statute that allows for the statute of limitations to be suspended because the government has been shut down or because the police have been defunded through the budget process. And I just think we ought to take the implications of a shutdown very seriously in terms of allowing criminals to get off. And I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair does not recognize himself. Quote, Mr. Weiss has full authority to bring cases
Okay.
in other jurisdictions
I mean,
if he feels it's necessary.
she
That
had
was your
somewhat
response,
of a
Attorney
point.
General, to Senator Grassley's question
Welcome,
on March 1st,
Jacob. Glad you're
2023.
here.
Just reference it.
A
Mr.
fantastic
Bishop
how
was
they've
questioning you.
turned.
Only problem is
That
he'd
on
already been
somebody
turned down
better
by the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, Mr. Graves.
better fight
So
back
he didn't have full authority, did he?
on that and not
I had
let
an
her
extended
try a
conversation
memory
with
hole
Senator Grassley
and
at the
real
time.
defund
We
the police
briefly
movement.
touched on the Section 515 question and how that
Seriously.
process went.
Thank you, Kaiser.
I
Thank you
have
for
never
the
been
for the
My
raid.
point's real simple,
I
Mr.
really
Garland. You said he
appreciate
had
it.
complete authority, but he'd already been turned down. He wanted to
On
bring an
Warren,
action
I
in the
haven't
District
had
of Columbia,
to
and the U.S. Attorney there said,
to
no, you
raid
can't.
yet,
And then
so
you go
I
tell the
didn't
United States
know
Senate under oath
how
that he
to
has complete
do
authority.
it.
I'm going to say
I'll
again that
figure it out
no
for
one
next
had the
time.
authority to turn him
You know,
down.
the
They could
interesting
refuse
on that is
to
is
partner with him. They could
You
not.
can use
just
whatever
picking up that
language,
link
but
off the
refuse to
top of my
partner is
show
turning down.
and
It's not the same
sticking it
under
in that
the
redirect
well-known Justice
engine.
Department practice.
You'll
Here's why the
figure it
statute of
out.
limitations
It's
question is
simple.
important, and Mr. Bishop was getting at just a
It's
few
just
minutes ago.
when
why
you
it's
haven't
important.
done it yet,
You
it
let the
takes a
statute of
moment to
limitations
figure it
lapse for
out.
2014, 2015. Those were the years with the felony tax charges where Hunter Biden was getting income from Burisma. Here are 4 facts that I think are so important. Hunter Biden was put on the board of Burisma, made a lot of money, got paid a lot of money over those years, a couple $1 million. He wasn't qualified. Fact number 2, he
Supposed to
wasn't
think got you
qualified
there.
to be on the board of Burisma.
And that's what
Not my
matters.
words,
That's what
his
matters.
words.
As long as you're here,
He said he got on
if
the
you
board because
haven't
of
done
his
so
last
already,
name. The brand, as
please
Devin
please
Archer
hit
said when he was
that
under oath
like
and we
button.
deposed him.
We don't
Fact
always
number 3,
do
Burisma executives
watch
told
parties.
Hunter Biden,
This is
we're
not
under pressure. We need help.
really a
Fact
normal.
number 4, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine,
I used to
leverages our
do
tax
more
money.
of a read.
American
I did
people's
read a
tax
few
money
articles
to
at the
get
very beginning
prosecutor
of the
fired who
episode.
was applying the pressure.
One that went along with
Interestingly enough, that fact
some
is
Russell
entirely
Brand,
consistent with what the
as
confidential
well
human
as went
source
through.
told the FBI, and they recorded in the 1023 form, the same form Mr. Ray
I like
didn't
Jim
want to let
Jordan.
this
I really
committee
do
and the Congress see.
appreciate
That
him.
all happened. That all happened.
I wish he
What
would
I'm wondering is why you guys let the
not
statute
yell
of
at everybody so
limitations
much.
lapse for those tax years that
He's
dealt
always
with
so
Burisma
much
income.
louder.
There's one more fact that's important, and that is that this investigation was being conducted by Mr. Weiss an appointee of President Trump. You will, at the appropriate time, have the opportunity to ask Mr. Weiss that question, and he will no doubt address it in the public report that will be transmitted to the Congress. I don't know the answer to those questions.
Did they forget? Did the lawyers just like let it? Did they just like, oh, darn, we let it? Were they careless?
I expect that won't be what he says, but because I
You
promised.
know that's not the case, because as Mr. Bishop pointed out, they had a tolling agreement. They talked to Hunter Biden's defense counsel and say, let's extend the statute of limitations. And then at some point, they made an intentional decision to say, we're going to let the statute of limitations lapse. And I want to know who decided that and why they did it.
Mr. Weiss was a supervisor of the investigation at that time and at all times. He made the appropriate decisions.
Watching
You'll be able
Garland
to ask him
squirm.
that question, and he
Like,
will.
way to relax.
Everyone knows
You
why
know,
they did it.
and I just,
They may not say it, but everyone knows why they did it.
I know
They
it can
didn't-
be
Baris-
a
those
lot.
tax years, that dealt with
So,
the pre-
you know,
that
I know
involved
that
the
there's a couple
president.
bullet
It's one thing
points
to
I
have a
can
gun
go and
charge in
click
Delaware.
on.
That doesn't involve the president of the United
I
States.
can just skip a whole bunch of
Burisma?
this
Oh my, that goes right to the White House. We can't have that. We can
ridiculous
slow walk this thing along. We can even extend the statute of limitations, and then we can
random
intentionally let it lapse.
banter
And we know this investigation
between
was slow.
Merrick
Here's what
Garland and
everyone
everybody
said.
else.
Shapley said, DOJ slow walked the investigation. Ziegler, slow walking in the approvals of everything. This happened at the Delaware's attorney's office and DOJ tax level. Mr. Sobocinski, the FBI agent, said, I would have liked to see things move faster. Ms. Holly said the same. Every witness we've talked to said this thing was slow walked, and we know why. They slow walked it long enough to let the statute of limitations run so they wouldn't have to get into Burisma. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'm asking Mr. Garland the
I
question.
think I've tried to make clear that I don't know the specifics of the
with the
investigation.
gentleman
Much
yield.
of what you were
Right
describing
after
occurred,
getting a question
during the
asked,
Trump
with
administration,
the gentleman
during
yield.
a Justice Department appointed
Just
by
ask the damn
President Trump.
question.
No, it didn't. This is 4.5 years, this investigation. We're talking about the last few years. Your statement was just this year, March 1st, to Senator Grassley.
No, I'm sorry. I was trying to respond to your descriptions of what the IRS agents said about certain
Statute of
things.
limitations is 6 years. That lapsed here in the Biden administration.
On the statute of limitations, we'll say again that the explanation for why the statute of limitation was lapsed, if it was, has to come from Mr. Weiss.
My time is this, but let me ask one last question real quick here. Who decided that David Weiss would stay on as U.S. attorney?
This had occurred before I came. Mr. Weiss had been kept on. I promised the.
No, I didn't say you can walk all through that. I said who decided? The White House decided.
Weiss,
they serve at the pleasure of the president, right?
Mr. Weiss was.
Joe Biden decided to keep
Can you
David
sit
Weiss
there
as U.S. attorney. You weren't sworn in until March.
Flap my gums, fumble, rumble through
told he
this.
was going to
Your
stay
time
on in
has
February.
expired.
Pretty fundamental question. Who decided David Weiss was going to stay as U.S. attorney in Delaware?
Mr. Weiss,
your time has expired.
Chairman, your time has expired.
I'm waiting for an answer, and I'll yield.
Well, you asked the question after your time had expired already. Point of order.
Gentleman can respond, then I'll go to Ms. Jackson Lee.
Mr. Weiss was the special U.S. attorney from the District of Delaware when I came on. He had been appointed by President Trump.
I'm the
I
chair.
promised that he would be permitted to stay on
I'm the
with this
final say.
investigation, and that is what happened.
Gentleman from Texas,
Mr. Chairman.
gentleman from New York's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you misquoted from the transcript of the Senate hearing. I therefore ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the entire transcript of the Senate hearing.
Without objection, but I didn't misquote what Mr. Garland said. Ms. Jackson Lee from Texas, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here we got
None
the
of
whole
the
Senate reading.
Republicans'
That way
goals today
we don't miss any
include
quotes.
solving Americans'
I
problems.
think you
of which
said
they
it
are
somewhere. You must have
There are
said
many
it somewhere.
reasons,
There's no way that
Mr.
you
Attorney
didn't
General,
say
that
it at
prosecutors
least
decline
somewhere.
to bring charges. One of those reasons is that they don't have any evidence for a conviction. That is the justice way. That
Yes,
is
Ms.
just
Jackson
in
Lee.
America. So let me raise these questions and concerns with you today. As we all know, Republicans have repeatedly alleged that the DOJ and FBI are conspiring to shield the Biden family from public criticism and giving Hunter Biden special treatment in its investigations. They have demonized law enforcement officials working with this case at every turn, which has directly led to increased threats against FBI officials, law enforcement, of which they pretend to support. I
Huh?
want to place into the record 2 excerpts from recent transcribed interviews, and I would ask that copies be made available to you. The first is from a June interview with Jennifer Moore, FBI's former Executive Assistant Director for Human Resources. She told this committee that FBI had received so many threats that it had to stand up an entire 10-person unit just to deal with them. She said it is unprecedented. It's a number we have never had before. More testimony, pages 202 to 203. The second excerpt is from an interview earlier this month with Thomas Sobocinski, the special agent in charge of FBI's Baltimore field office.
Guy.
Here's what he said. I joined the FBI 25 years ago. I joined for a reason, to protect the American people, uphold the Constitution. I've been to war. My family's been in bad places. My kids
She's
have been
gonna
evacuated from
ramble
war
for the
zones,
whole
quasi
5
war
minutes.
zones.
And she's
I've
not
been in
gonna
some
ask a
bad things.
goddamn
I've
question.
accepted that.
There's
I'm
nothing that
solely
she needs to
focused on
say
2
that
things, and they're
anything
not
more
mutually
to it,
exclusive.
because
The first is
everything
like
that
every
she's gonna say is
investigation,
just a bunch
I
of
want to get
gibberish.
to a
By the
resolution in
time
a
she
fair,
gets to the end of
apolitical way.
whatever she's
The
trying to
second
say at
thing,
the end of the
it's
5
becoming more
minutes,
important and more
she
relevant, is
maybe
keeping
try
my folks
ending it
safe.
with some kind
And
of question.
that part,
But we
I've
don't
never
know if the
expected
question is going to be
to
of
have
any
to be able
relevance
to
to
be concerned
anything,
about keeping
because
families
for
safe. So
whatever
that, for
reason,
me,
we don't
this is
really
becoming more
care
and more
about
of a job that
anything
I have
but
to do
the
and take
Baltimore
away
field
from what I
office
was
that's been there
assigned
for
or signed up to
25
do,
years,
which was to
and this, that, and the
investigate
other,
and do these
some
things.
bullshit.
So when you talk
Uh,
about
it,
potential frustrations with
waste of
communication, I am
time,
personally
because
frustrated
she
with
doesn't
anything that
care to
places my
question
employees and their
of
families in enhanced
anything
danger.
of
Our children,
relevance,
their children did not sign up for this.
because
Mr.
she's
Attorney General,
just not
do you
that
agree the
way.
politically charged rhetoric claiming that law enforcement agents, and I have many questions if you could be brief, are corrupt and contribute to this onslaught of threats against public servants?
Okay, as I said in my opening statement, we have
Reclaiming
had
my
an
time.
astounding number of threats against public servants over the last several years. I think that when career public servants in the Justice Department and in election workers and airline crews, when they are singled out, this can lead to threats of violence and actual violence.
Thank
We
you.
have the actual example of an attack on an FBI office by somebody who was incensed by political rhetoric. This does happen. We must not allow that to happen in this country.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that first part.
Does the rhetoric regarding the Biden case have any basis in reality?
No, it does not.
How does this impact FBI and DOJ employees' ability to do their work? I think you mentioned specifically FBI and DOJ employees.
As I've
Specifically,
already said, the
not Atlantically.
agents of the FBI and the prosecutors understand that criticism comes with their job, and they will continue to do their jobs without fear or favor. But the idea of threatening their safety or that of their families is just abhorrent.
Thank you. And I assume that provisions have had to be in place to protect these agents and their families.
We're going to
So
ramble
the first
back and
part.
I
forth
assume
with
that
each other.
provisions or protections have had to be in place
for
to
a few
protect these
minutes.
agents and their families.
Yes, that's correct.
Let me move on. Thank you very much, General. Let me move on to the fentanyl crisis, and I want to introduce HR 4272. But let me just put on the record so that you can probably summarize, and I ask for the indulgence of my chair, but in any event, that the FBI, the DOJ are focused, needlepoint focused, if you will, on the crisis of fentanyl. I want to just raise that for you, and then I just want to follow up with 1 or 2 other questions. If you'll be able
fentanyl?
to comment on these collectively.
She's
I'm
concerned
dealing
about
with
the fentanyl
of
crisis.
human trafficking and the
I mean,
prioritizing
it's
of
a
America's
good
children.
crisis to be
They are
worried
on the
about,
sea,
because it takes
and the
so
level
little
of child sexual
to
abuse materials
destroy somebody's
generating into
life
human
so
trafficking,
easily
and I want to put HR 30 on the record,
that
indicates
it really could
from
turn into
ICAC
something
that there are
horrible
99,000
when it comes down to
cases
it.
where they're enticing
What
children,
have we got going
and
on
maybe
here?
only 1% of them being investigated. I'd
Some
like your
bleeps
comment on
and
that. And
blurps.
finally, in the approach of of Yom Kippur, to emphasize the work that is hopefully still being doing with anti-Semitism, attacks on immigrants and African Americans and Latinos. If you would answer those questions: fentanyl, the human trafficking, and then domestic terrorism.
These are all horrendous problems propagated by people who are truly evil. We are fighting the fentanyl scourge in every possible way, starting with the precursors in China to the
I'm glad that we
labs
could
in
waste
Mexico,
the time on the
cartels
fentanyl.
that
I
are
mean,
bringing
it's a
the
great
drugs into the United
thing to
States, to
speak
the
of, and we
networks
should
in the
talk
United
about it.
States,
Should get a
to the
lot of
streets of
answers out of
America.
this
And we will
for
continue
this,
to do that
but
with every
not
resource that Congress
here.
gives us. Human smuggling and sex trafficking are obviously abhorrent. The Justice Department has task forces on both of these
Everything's just
subjects and
abhorrent
have
to
fought many,
today.
many
Okay,
cases
okay.
on these
Good to know.
subjects. The
Good
idea
to
of
know that
putting
you just so happen to
sexually
figure out what
explicit
that word
material
even
about children
means.
on the web is another area that we are continuing to investigate and to prosecute and to ask the social media to take down from their sites.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman floor is recognized for 5 minutes.
I guess I'm just wondering, Mr. Attorney General, has anyone at the department told President Biden to knock it off with Hunter? I mean, you guys are charging Hunter Biden on some crimes, investigating
Gates
him
just
on
come
others.
straight out
You got the
swinging.
president bringing Hunter Biden around to state dinners. Has anyone told him to knock it off?
Our job in the Justice Department is to pursue our cases without reference to what's happening in the outside world.
Just yes or no. Have you done that?
That is what we do.
So it's a no?
No one that I know of has spoken to the White House about the Hunter Biden
I'm
case.
wondering
Of
then,
course not.
okay, I got it. So Hunter Biden is selling art to pay for his $15,000 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that the people
I
buying that art aren't doing so to
appreciate
gain
Gates
favor
for
with
what
the
he
president?
is. He's a great guy.
Job of the Justice Department is to investigate.
He's got some
criminal
issues.
allegations. You have
Are you
information.
Like we
investigating
went
this?
through
I mean,
yesterday,
someone who bought
he's
Hunter Biden's art ended up with a
looking
prestigious
at potentially
appointment to a
moving
federal position.
himself
Doesn't it look
to
weird
a
that
gubernatorial
he's
run
become this immediate success in the
for
art world as his dad is president of the United
Florida,
States? Isn't that odd?
I'm not going to
as
comment
opposed to
about any
staying
specific.
Not
with
going
the
to comment, not going to
House,
investigate. So
right.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer told us that
which
Hunter
would
sold
open
the
up
appearance of
this
access
House
to then
seat
Vice President Biden. Are you confident he has stopped
potentially
doing
be
that?
vacated
Sorry, I didn't
in
understand the question.
Hunter Biden associate Devin Archer
2026,
told us that Hunter sold the appearance of
causing
access
some
to
kind
then
of
Vice
runoff in
President Biden. Are you
Florida
confident he has stopped?
I'm going
for
to say again
midterms.
that all these matters are within the purview of Mr. Weiss. I have not interfered with them, and I
Yeah, but
do
if you were
not,
confident that he had stopped, you could.
and I do
you could
not
probably
intend
tell
to
us
interfere with
he
him.
had. I want to. So it was a lot of Chinese money that was working its way through these shell companies into the accounts of the Biden family. So the China initiative was set up during the Trump administration at the Department of Justice to go after the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And the Biden Justice Department dissolved the China initiative.
He didn't
So I
like
guess
that.
I'm wondering, does the department have
He didn't
any
ask for the case. He's a
documents
wrecking
that
ball.
would detail the
God help us
basis
if he's
for
our
why
next
you got
governor.
rid
Yeah,
of the
he's
China initiative that
a
President
piece of
Trump
work
had
for
set up?
sure.
Assistant Attorney General for the
Do you know
National
about the
Security
motion to
Division gave a
vacate
long speech which explained
the
that. He has
speakership allegedly
testified
from
before
Gates'
Congress
office?
several
Yes.
times. We'd
Yes,
be happy
Gates
to
is the one that's
provide you
pushing
What's
that.
the basis? Just tell us all now.
What
Why was
up,
the China initiative
Shiloh,
dissolved?
man?
What,
Good to see you,
what the
dude.
Assistant Attorney General said was that
You know,
we
as
face
far as
attacks from 4 nation states:
uh,
North Korea,
Gates
China, Russia, and
going
Iran.
after
We need to focus our
McCarthy,
attention on the broad range of these attacks. Sometimes we
But-
don't
but
it's a
know.
great deal.
Are you saying that North Korea
Gates
has the same
doesn't like
malign
McCarthy.
influence
Didn't
risk
like
to the United
McCarthy the
States as
first
the
14
Chinese Communist
times,
Party?
and
Are you
didn't like
trying
him
to
the
represent their some
15th
parity
time
there?
either.
Because here's what it
And
looks like.
as
It looks
as
like the
opposed
Chinese
to
gave all
voting
this
for somebody
money to
else
the
or
Bidens,
not
and then
voting,
you guys came in and got rid of the
he
China initiative. And it was
abstained from
successful. Like,
voting,
I saw one
saying that
rationale
he was
that you
not
guys got rid
there,
of the China initiative because it was racial profiling.
and allowed
But
the
one of the
number
people
to
you
be
convicted was a guy
slightly
named Charles
lower.
Lieber, who was a Harvard professor
Both
taking
him and Lauren
$50,000 a
Boebert's
month to
votes
do China's bidding
were
and give them
just that,
whatever research was being done.
absent.
Are you aware of the millions of dollars
I mean,
that
it
moved
wasn't
through Rob
filed,
Walker's shell
but found
companies from
intentionally
Chinese Communist
placed.
Party
Is
entities
shot
into Biden
across.
family bank accounts? Are you aware of that?
Wow, what a
There were a
clumsy
lot of questions
staffer.
that you just asked. Let me start with the first one about North Korea. North Korea is a dangerous actor, both kinetically and with respect to cyber.
But not on par with China. I'm on the Armed Services
I'm not in the
Committee, Mr.
business
Attorney
right
General.
now of
It's, okay, it makes you look unserious to suggest
May
that.
I answer your question or not?
Answer the question about whether or not you know about all the millions of dollars
Great
that moved
don't want me to answer
liquor.
about North
What
I
up?
already know the answer, and so
Good to
does
see you,
everyone.
brother.
They're
Good to
not
see
the
you.
same risk as China. So let's get on to
Sitting
serious
over on
questions
that
and serious
Rumble
answers. Do
side.
you know about the money that moved through Rob Walker's shell companies? Yes or no?
As I have said repeatedly, I have left
See, you know,
these
well,
matters
this
to
is
Mr. Weiss. I've not
potentially
intruded, I've
going,
not interfered,
Blissfully
I've
ignorant to
not
these
tried to
things.
find
and
out
how
what's
the
Like
going
you're
on.
looking the other
conversation's
way on
still
purpose. It's
moving
because
itself
everybody knows this stuff's
along.
happening. And you know what? People don't pay
Um,
bribes to not
not
get something in
feeling it
return.
necessary to
Right?
skip forward
The
yet.
China initiative resulted in the
There's a
convictions
couple of
of a
breaks that
Harvard
do
professor,
happen.
of someone at Monsanto.
There's a
So we
couple
were
hot
working
points
against the
that we can
Chinese.
jump
They
to
paid
if
the Bidens, and
necessary.
now you're sitting here telling me that North Korea is the
If
big
you
threat.
didn't think
I
that
got to answer this one
these
thing on January
Well,
6th.
moments
So
were
did the
spicy
FBI,
enough,
lose
there are
count of the
some
number of
very
paid
good
informants
ones
on
that
January
do
6th?
appear.
Let me answer your question about China.
I want you to
China
answer this
is the
question. I only get
most.
5 minutes. You've already
China.
certified
You
things
asked
through
me
the
a
It's all
food
about
question, you
China.
haven't
So
It's
permitted
been
January
about
6th,
China
did
for
you
a
lose
long
count of the
time.
number of federal assets? Did you lose count in order and audit?
Gentleman's time has expired.
I get an answer to the question of did they lose count?
No,
of
let
the
him
number-
answer the question.
The time has expired. The Attorney General can respond.
China is the most aggressive, most dangerous
Mr.
adversary
Attorney
the
General, I think
United
that-
States faces, and we are doing everything within our power to rebut that, to stop that, to prevent their invasions, both kinetic, and through cyberspace. And we will continue to
If
do
someone
that.
gave that answer in your courtroom when you were a judge, you would tell them they were being
Mr.
non-responsive
Chairman,
and you would direct them to answer the question.
Point of order, Your Honor.
Time is,
Badgering the witness.
Point
the
of
time
order,
has
please.
expired.
I got it. I was
You like Your Honor? You want to stick with
I
that?
was,
yeah,
I
I was getting laughing
was
from a couple of
what?
Your Honor.
Point of order either way.
Okay, I understand that too.
All right.
But the gentleman asked his question before his
Um,
time expired. The Attorney General did not respond to the gentleman's question. I was hoping
Just
he
because
would
it
respond
crossed
to the
my
question about
mind.
the confidential human sources on January
Don't
6th. He didn't
forget,
respond to that.
members
So we're gonna
only.
get- We're going to get an answer to that later.
Of course.
Now-
Saturday
now
night.
recognize the gentleman.
Questions before that he was not given a chance. to
ID
answer.
Crisis
The witness might
joins
have.
me
But the witness doesn't, Mr. Chairman, point of
for
order. The witness does not
conversations with
control the time.
Koolfrogg.
Hang on. Exactly
Should
right.
be a good one.
Members
Should be a
control
good
the
one.
time. If they want to
That
switch their
is a
question and
members
focus on one
only.
more question that they'd like an answer to,
Be
I
sure
want to
to
give the
turn
witness
on
a chance to
gifted
respond to
options
that
as
final question that Mr. Gates asked.
sometimes that
He didn't
occurs.
respond to it. Someone else is going to ask it, I'm
Sometimes
sure.
it
We now
occurs.
recognize the gentleman from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Sometimes I
Thank
put
you,
on a
sir.
better show than
Follow up to
others.
the questions we're asked here.
Sometimes
Devin
people
Archer
don't
not
mind
say
listening to what
Joe
we're
Biden
listening
did
to.
nothing wrong.
Sometimes you find that there's almost everybody
Clear.
else
I only
covering the
know
same
about
thing.
Mr. Archer from newspaper reports. I want to be clear that I kept my promise to not involve myself in this
Okay, and
investigation.
I'll state it. He said that Joe Biden did nothing wrong. Secondly, did you say that President Trump appointed Weiss, who then you appointed?
Yes, President Trump appointed Mr. Weiss as United States Attorney.
So that should take care of that issue. And they say the department's been weaponized. Wasn't there an investigation of Mr. Gates and you didn't
What's that
prosecute
fucking
him?
supposed to mean?
Justice Department does not make comments about it.
Democrat out
Shows
of
you we're not
Tennessee, Mr.
weaponized. If we were
Conan.
weaponized, we'd have done it. That was a beautiful
Mr. Conan,
change there. It shows we didn't do
you
that. You are
jerk.
the nation's
Oh,
chief
that
law
does that
enforcement
takes care of
officer. I
that
appreciate
issue as
that.
I'm sitting
And
here
law
with my
enforcement's one of our
my
government's
yellow and blue
fundamental
tie
functions.
as
Crime
I
is growing
support
too much in this country and in my city of Memphis as
funding
well.
as much of
We
Ukraine
need
as
law enforcement
possible
to be
because I
effective,
know it
swift, and fair.
gets circled
I'd
right
like to
back
focus my questions on what's
to my own
actually
back
affects the
pocket.
American people.
Great
Crime.
liquor. Good to see you come
How do
over
we get
to
smarter law enforcement?
I
Requiring
don't
smart
know, the
resource
other
allocations.
side.
Not about funding or less funding, but the right funding for the right programs.
We
And
can call it
see
what
that
it
that
is,
happens.
right?
Memphis, as
The
hiring
other
has become more
side.
difficult, we've lowered our standards to get more officers. That's not the way to do it. The COPS program is helping us review the policy and procedures, and I thank you, the COPS program, for doing that. But what can Department of Justice do to help see that law enforcement is more efficient and more effective?
So the key to this is our partnership, the FBI, DEA, Marshals, ATFs, partnership at every local level with local and state law enforcement, in task forces, in discussions to target the most dangerous criminals in those communities, but at the same time to engage
Yes,
the
we'll call it
communities
the other side.
to help engender
So you like
community
to pay
trust
attention
in
to the
law
rumble side
enforcement.
as well.
Everyone who's prosecuted violent crime cases, and
Do
that
have a
includes me,
plan for an
knows
exclusive
that you need the
is
trust of the
make it through
community
this
in
in
order to
good
get
time.
witnesses. We in the Justice Department are helping our state and local colleagues do just that. The funding you described from the COPS office and in the Office of Justice
has a
Programs
tendency to play with
allows us to
things.
give money to state and local police organizations that are having trouble with recruitment and retention and promotion of law
Give them a
officers,
little bit of a
and
speed up.
helps them make their departments respectful of constitutional rights and at the same time effective in the investigation and prosecution of criminal law violations.
Thank you for those activities, those programs through COPS. You've also reinstituted patterns and practices investigations of certain police departments, and Memphis is one of them, and I thank you for doing that. Can you share with us how important those pilot programs are and how they can improve policing?
Yes, Congress has authorized the Justice Department to conduct pattern or practice investigations when they have a reasonable belief in that there has been a pattern of unconstitutional behavior in a police department. We are careful to select those cases where we think there is such a pattern. We make those investigations. We then work with the law enforcement agencies in the cities. Our hope is to come to a consent decree that will lead to a better, more efficient,
certain
and
areas
more constitutional police department. We have been successful in all of our cases to
questioning
date in reaching consent agreements.
aren't starred as like hard-hitting points,
Bringing of charges, federal charges against the
because even C-SPAN realizes
Tyree Nichols in Memphis, and I thank you for
what's
that.
good listening and what's
federal,
not.
charge, and we
This
need
part of it can get a little dry.
If there's a shutdown of the federal government,
'Cause,
how will that
you
affect
know,
the Department of
Cohen-
Justice and affect policing in local communities?
I haven't done a complete calculation on the effects of a shutdown and the difference between which employees are indispensable under the statute and which ones not. It will certainly disrupt all of our normal programs, including our grant programs to state and local law enforcement, and to our ability to conduct our normal efforts with respect to the entire scope of our.
From California is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, looking again at the appointment of Jack Smith and David Weiss, this double standard of justice couldn't be more glaring. Jack Smith was deeply involved in the IRS scandal that targeted conservative political groups to harass. His malicious prosecution of former Governor McDonald.
Ads inserted. Thank you everybody for watching the ads. If you haven't watched the ads, watch the ads. The ads are what pays us
You appointed him
content
to prosecute
creators.
Joe Biden's chief rival for the presidency.
The ads.
And then we have the
Yes, watch
appointment
the
of David
ads.
Weiss.
If you got premium, thank
deliberately
you
allowed the statute of
more.
limitations to
Thank
run
you.
out
We
on any
really do
charges that had
appreciate you.
implicated Joe
Premium
Biden in
users, premium users to
He
bring
originally
along
offered Hunter Biden
a
a
little bit
sweetheart deal that
more
was ultimately upended by the court.
dollary due when it
And
comes
he's the
to
one
it.
you appointed to
We
pursue
do
the charges
appreciate you
that could implicate Joe Biden.
doing all of
That
that.
leaves me to only two explanations, either corruption or incompetence. So which is it?
Those are the kind of questions that judges would rule out of order.
I'm sure you would. Which is
Look, I said
PDs
before,
with a
I will say
history
again,
of
Mr. Weiss was the
unconstitutional
Republican
behavior.
appointed United States attorney, appointed by
Like
President
yours,
Trump.
Mr. Garland.
Do you at least see
Please
the
let someone
obvious
ask it.
double standard applied in these two appointments?
Mr. Weiss was a Republican appointee. Mr. Smith is not registered to either party. His entire
I don't care
career
what
was
their
as
party
a career
registrations are.
prosecutor.
I'm not
That
asking what
does
their
not
party
seem like a
registrations
double
are. I'm
standard.
asking about their records and how those records would commend them to the appointments that you made. This is a question of judgment and it's a question of motive. What was motivating you to do this?
Mr. Smith had a nationwide reputation for integrity and for appropriate prosecution. His work can be measured by what he actually has filed. Everyone in the country can see the indictments.
How can you
that he has
say that
charged.
after he was so heavily implicated in the IRS scandal or the rebuke that the Supreme Court gave and many other examples? But let me go on. We've had two IRS whistleblowers inform Congress of attempts by senior Justice Department officials to obstruct the criminal investigation into millions of dollars of ill-gotten and undeclared income to Hunter Biden. They noted several deviations by department officials from normal process that provided
they were
preferential
giving-
treatment, in this case to Hunter Biden, a direct quote.
Like they're just like,
including allowing
well,
the statute of limitations to
here's some
lapse, requesting
information
IRS
for
and
you.
FBI management level investigative communications.
Half of you
investigators
take
referring to the big
this
guy
side
or
of the
dad
room,
in
the other
witness
half
interviews,
take the other side of
excluding
the
the
room,
investigative team from meetings with
and
defense counsel and
and
notifying
debate
defense counsel
about
of
it.
pending search warrants. U.S.
And
Attorney's Office
nobody
even
from
tipped off the
either
Bidens of an impending
side
search of a storage unit where their records were
sees
displayed.
anything
Now,
from
that
the
sounds
other
an awful
side
lot
as
like
being
obstruction of justice to me.
potentially
Was that coming
anything
from you or from somebody
of
else?
good, and
Sorry, I don't
everything
understand.
just so
It's not coming
happens
from
to
you.
be
I don't
so.
understand the question.
all of
divided.
the actions that your employees took
There
to
isn't like
obstruct
one person on either side
investigation
that
of
so
Hunter
happens to
Biden
think
and the tax
slightly
earnings that
anything
he
different.
made and the
And as
taxes
opposed
he
to, even
failed
if
to
they
declare,
did, as
their
opposed to
source and
speaking up
ultimately
about it,
who they were paid to.
that they'd be
To say again, with
silent.
respect to the Hunter Biden investigation,
They'd be
it
silent.
has been and still is in the hands of Mr. Weiss, an appointee of President Trump. I don't know about all these allegations. Some of them appear to have
Ask
been
some
from the period
softball
when
question.
the Attorney
And
General
sit there.
appointed by President Trump was still the Attorney General.
Do these charges trouble you at all?
Mr. Weiss will have an opportunity to explain the decisions.
Well, you're the guy in charge. Does this trouble you?
I have intentionally not involved myself in the facts of the case, not because I'm trying to get out of responsibility, but because I'm trying to pursue my responsibility.
Your FBI director testified before this committee of an uptick in, quote, known or suspected terrorists coming across the southern border. And he told us that the southern border represents a massive security threat. Those were his words, a massive security threat. Do you agree?
I'm perfectly happy to align myself with the director of the FBI.
Well, why is it then that we, senior administration, rescind the Trump era orders that had secured that border? We've seen an exponential increase in suspected terrorists.
Time the gentleman's expired. The witness can respond. He chooses.
This is the answer to this question about immigration law is an extremely long answer. I would defer to the Department of Homeland Security, which is responsible for the physical security and about first
defer you
contact
to
with the
somebody
border.
else?
With
Is
We've
that
tried
what
to get
this,
answers from
this
him. He
whole
didn't give them to us, so
administration
we're hoping
does?
you would. I understand, Mr.
Just
Attorney
defer
General,
you to
requested
somebody
a short
else?
break, so we'll take a short break and resume in 5 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
All right. Take 5, eh? You just skip through this 5. If you haven't done so already, please smash that like button. Like, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful YouTube-y-like things. On the Rumble side, the better side, be ready. We do have an upcoming Rumble exclusive when we're done here watching this Merrick Garland being questioned
The gentleman
by the Justice
Georgia, Mr. Johnson,
Department
5 minutes.
Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Garland, great to see you. Thank you for your service to the nation. And the nation watches as the Republicans have no answer for why they want to focus and obsess on Hunter Biden receiving $2 million from Burisma after serving on a board that he said he was not qualified to serve on. But yet the Saudi Arabians gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner, who conducted Middle East strategy for his dear old dad, Donald Trump. He got $2 billion for something that he is not equipped to do, which is investment banking. And so Republicans looking at Hunter Biden instead of
then
Jared
Nod's
Kushner, Americans don't understand how that could be.
Nod's
They
dad
also are increasingly
just so
alarmed about the
happens to
fact
be
that Republicans in control of the House
an
always seem
investment
to have 3
banker.
objectives. One is to impeach Joe Biden. Number 2 is to shut down, is to impeach or get rid of Kevin McCarthy, actually. And the
Well,
third is
look
to
what
shut
you
down
look what you
government.
guys did
And a subset
through
of
the
that is to
House
defund the DOJ
against
and the FBI
Republicans for
trying
so long.
to hold Donald Trump accountable. So the American people are watching that, and they also appreciate the fact that you've had
You
a
healthy,
distinguished
Mr. Hank
career,
Johnson?
as a prosecutor and a DOJ official, as well as
Hope everything's
24 years
okay.
on the bench. You served on the second highest court of the land as a judge for 24 years, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. We appreciate your service. You were for 7 years the lead. You managed that entire office. We thank you for that. You also served on the Judicial Council for a number of years, and so you are steeped in the rule of law. You are a judge extraordinaire, and as a judge, You never had the occasion
You're a
to
judge extraordinaire that
receive
didn't get the
private jet
seat.
travel to an exotic location by a corporate billionaire, did you?
Did not get the seat. The Senate did not allow
You
him
can cut your mic on.
to
No.
be.
Never received an offer to get a ride on a private jet?
No.
Did you take any vacations at exclusive
Thank
resorts
you
paid
so
for
much
by
that
a
it didn't
billionaire?
happen.
I know these are
Did
not
not
hypothetical
get
questions.
selected.
I think this is really
yes or
not
no?
within my realm. Of course,
I mean, you were a
To be
judge
said in the Supreme
extraordinaire,
Court
and you
of the
know the
United
rules
States
of
of
ethics
America.
for judges because your bench had to
Merrick Garland
was covered by a code of
didn't
conduct.
think
Is
he's
that not correct?
destroying what he's
yes,
doing here.
all the judges,
You imagine
federal appellate and district judges are covered by the code of conduct.
You would
getting
never
back.
have had somebody to pay for your godson's tuition to private school. Would
And
you?
I don't want to answer these kind of hypothetical, at least
Well,
to me, they're hypothetical questions. What I would say is that I always, as a judge, and I've said this before and quite publicly and long ago, always held myself to the highest standards of ethical responsibility imposed by the code. And that's really all I can answer here.
And it's required that judges and justices avoid even appearances of impropriety. Isn't that correct?
But you have
Again,
no
I know you're
requirement for
asking this both
education.
hypothetically and non-hypothetically. All I can say is I follow the code of judicial conduct and includes avoiding appearances.
Just
Well,
have
let
to
me
be
ask you this
trusted.
question. Senator Whitehouse and I sent a letter to you
It's amazing
alerting you to
who
the fact
could
that
be
we were asking the
selected
Judicial Council to refer the matter of Clarence Thomas being
to
in
be
violation of
the
the
seat
Ethics and Government Act to
of
the
Supreme
Justice
Court.
Department. And after that, Representative
Requires
Alexandra
no
Ocasio-Cortez,
education
along with
whatsoever.
myself and others, requested that you take that matter up directly. Have you responded to either one of those letters? And if not, why not? And what action have you taken pursuant to those letters?
Gentleman may respond.
I assume that if you sent the letter, we have it, and I'll speak to the Office of Legislative Affairs about where it is at this point.
Is
The
the
time the
department investigating?
gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
Thank you. Good day, Mr. Attorney General. And this may be the reason that it's good for you to leave the Chief Justice and that group before each of us speak, because you would have already heard all that. I want to thank you personally for your office and your engagement on Camp Lejeune and on obviously a vast amount of litigation. That is one of the many
So now
jobs
here
that
comes one of
falls
the
at your feet.
stars. One of the stars is
jobs that
coming
falls
up
at our
right
feet
about in here.
is that we are watchdogs of the
So-
executive branch. You have previously said that you are not Congress's attorney, and you've said you're not the president's attorney. And I'm assuming that you're neither our prosecutor nor our defense attorney, and you are neither the president's prosecutor nor defense attorney. And that's why today's investigation really does deal with the fact that if you're not, by definition, the president's prosecutor,
The
but we
stars
have an
usually
obligation to
heavier
see whether or
blows.
not the president or a member of his family or in
Sections
concert
to
with
pay
the president's
attention to.
activities, in fact, need to be overseen, admonished, or even prosecuted. And so I have a couple of questions for you. And one of them is that you have not said this very much today, but you often say, I cannot comment on that because it's an ongoing investigation. And when we ask for information, you very commonly say that it is the policy, not the law, but the policy of the Department of Justice not to provide information related to an ongoing investigation. So far, I'm on track. Is that correct?
I think I've said more than that's just a policy. I think the letters we've sent trace it to the constitutional separation of powers, to Rule 6E of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, et cetera. But in general, I'm in accord with what you're saying.
So one of the challenges we face is that just a matter of weeks ago, a federal judge found the actions of now special prosecutor to be so outside what he could agree to that he pushed back on a plea settlement and nullified it and sent the U.S. attorney going back. In light of that, don't you think it's appropriate for that portion to be considered a pre-ongoing investigation and for Congress to legitimately look at the activities leading up to that failed plea bargain rather than wait until weeks, months, or years from now a case is fully settled?
So if you'll give me a chance, first, I don't agree with the characterization of what happened in the plea. The district judge performed her obligations under Rule 11 to determine whether the parties were in agreement as to what each had agreed to and determined that they were not. We fell apart, as you know. There's been another prosecution. So that leads to the second thing. We are in, Mr. Weiss is in the midst of an ongoing prosecution on the very matter that you're talking about.
Okay, but Mr. Attorney General, if we believe, and we do, at least on this side of the dais, that a pattern of behavior is occurring relative to the investigation of Hunter Biden particularly and including, well, he lived in the vice president's home. Well, he operated commingled with the vice president, and even today as he travels with the president. So in light of that, can you agree that, in fact, it should be reasonable for us to look at a number of items, including, and one that I want your answer on, and we know we have limited time. Mr. Weiss supposedly had this ability to bring a prosecution anywhere. He now explicitly has that ability. However, are you concerned, and should we have the right to look into the fact that political appointees in California and in the District of Columbia refused to, in fact, cooperate with him in those investigation that he was charged with doing in Delaware, but which flowed over into their jurisdictions? Isn't that, in fact, an example where those political appointees of the now president, that their decision not to cooperate with him creates at least an appearance of political interference with the investigation of the president's son and possibly activities related to the president?
I'm happy to answer this question in hypothetical, but not in the specifics because I have stayed out of this matter. In the hypothetical, it is the normal process of the department that if a U.S. attorney in one district wants to bring a case in another, they go to that other district and consult. It's perfectly appropriate. They do that in order to determine what the policies are in that district, what the practices have been in that district, what the judges are like in that district. But a U.S. attorney in another district does not have the authority to deny another U.S. attorney the ability to go forward. And I have assured Mr. Weiss that he would have the authority one way or the other. And I think Mr. Weiss's letters completely reflect that.
Thank you. To be continued.
Time the gentleman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Welcome, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for leading the department with such integrity. We meet today at a momentous time in our history. The country is about to go through a great trial. By this, I do not mean any of the several trials of the former president, but rather a trial of the proposition that we are a nation of laws, committed to the rule of law, and that no one is above the law. It is a proposition well known around the world because it is the one essential ingredient in all democracies. We have all but it has never been truly tested, not like it is today. In this committee, we are engaged in a portion of that trial. The chairman would abuse the power of this committee by trying to interfere in the prosecutions of Donald Trump, by trying to use the committee's power of subpoena to compel criminal discovery, in effect, making the committee a kind of criminal defense firm for the former president. In doing so, the chairman of this committee would establish a very different proposition. Through Mr. Jordan's actions, he would establish the principle that the rule of law should apply to
censured for this
just not the
particular
leader of
stuff.
his party. According to this alternate proposition, if you are the president of the United States and you lose your reelection, you can violate the law and constitution to try to stay in power. And if you are successful, well, then maybe you get to be president for life. And if you fail, there is no repercussion. This proposition is also well known to the world, and it is called dictatorship. Mr. Jordan hopes to camouflage his assault on the rule of law by falsely claiming that Donald Trump is the victim of unequal justice and Hunter Biden its beneficiary. It is a claim as transparently political as it is devoid of any factual basis. And it is cynical, based on the belief that the American people cannot discern fact from fiction. But I am betting on America. History has shown that those who bet against her are rarely successful, and more often they end up covered with shame. I believe in the rule of law, and I thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for defending it. Let me now turn to some of the false claims asserted by the former president and some on this committee. On Sunday, the former president appeared on a national news Sunday program and was asked about
Seriously, everybody else really doing
his response was
the same thing?
Excuse me, Biden political indictments.
Looking around.
Attorney General, he said to the
I was
Attorney
looking
General,
around and I kind of caught my eye.
Mr. Attorney General, I want to give you a chance to
at
respond.
who else was doing
Was the
what?
president telling the truth, or was he lying when he said
And
that President Biden
it kind of seemed like
No one has told me to indict, and in this
I
case, the
haven't
decision
been
to
able to
indict was
pay
made by the
attention all
special counsel.
day.
So
I
that
thought
statement
this
the
would be
president made on
something
Sunday was
good to
false.
go over.
So I'm just going to say again that no one has told me who should be indicted in any matter
Oh,
like this,
okay.
and the decision about indictment was made by Mr. Smith.
Let me ask you this question about the prosecution of Hunter Biden. The prosecutor in that case, Mr. Weiss, was appointed not by Joe Biden, but he was appointed in the first instance by Donald Trump. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And he was continued in that position, was he not?
He was continued in that position, yes.
And Mr. Attorney General, can you imagine
Nobody
the
said
hue
that
and
Donald
cry
Trump was a
you would
good
hear from my
judge
colleagues on the
character.
other side of the aisle if you had removed him from that position? Can you imagine the claims that you had removed a prosecutor who was diligently investigating Hunter Biden? Can you imagine the outrage they would have expressed?
I can say that during my confirmation hearing, discussed with many senators on that side of the aisle, their desire and actual insistence that Mr. Weiss be continued to have responsibility for that matter. And I promised, and I said at my confirmation hearing, that he would be permitted to stay and that I would not interfere.
And Mr. Attorney General, that was exactly the right decision. That was the
Are you-
right decision.
Well, of course
to give
you
the
think
American
that's
people
the right
confidence
decision.
That even a
It's
prosecutor
not
chosen by
necessarily the
former
right
president
decision, though.
would continue in the investigation into
Just
the son
because
of the
you
current
think it's the
president.
right
That was
decision.
exactly the right decision. Exactly the right decision. And my
No,
colleagues
I
on the other
disagree
side
with you,
of the
Mr.
aisle
Schiff.
would have been screaming if it were otherwise.
Looking a little chunky.
But their attack on you is completely devoid of fact, of principle. But I appreciate you doing the right thing for the Department of Justice and, more importantly, the
Well
right thing
said.
for the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky. Attorney General Garland, Elon Musk
No,
is a
Dr.
Democrat
Pepper.
who admittedly supported Biden, but then he became a critic of the administration and exposed the censorship regime. Now, per public reports, the DOJ has opened not one but two investigations of Elon Musk. Mark Zuckerberg, on the other hand, spent $400 million in 2020 tilting the elections
Kim did.
secretly for Democrats. No investigations whatsoever. To the American public, these look like mafia tactics.
Keep that
You
chat
pay us
moving.
your money, we look the other way.
Keep
You
that
get in
chat
our
moving.
way, we punish you. The American public sees what these
I know
tactics
you
are.
got it in
Now I
you.
want to direct
I
your
know you got it in you
attention to
that
the
you
video
can
here
keep the
we're
chat
gonna play.
moving. You can all talk to each other.
Obviously, that's
All
a
three of
significant
you
matter.
would?
It is an ongoing criminal investigation.
Come
so I'm not going
on.
to comment on an ongoing criminal investigation.
Were those pipe bombs operable?
Again,
The ATF is the expert.
again, it's an ongoing criminal
Did everybody
investigation.
already
and
do
under
all of
longstanding
this?
policy, I cannot comment.
As you know, this is a
Is that
very
what's going
active,
on?
ongoing investigation, and there are some restrictions
Nobody
on
wants
that.
to
but
answer
can
me.
handle
Nobody's paying
classified
attention to
information,
anybody
and
else
we fund your
either.
department, and so
They're
you
like,
need to provide
if
that.
they're here,
It's
they're
not,
here.
respectfully, it's not an issue of classification. It's an
They
issue
don't
of
care.
commenting on ongoing criminal investigations, which is something that by longstanding department policy, we are restricted in doing. And in fact, the last administration actually strengthened those policies partly
That's
because—
not our policy, though, and we fund you. So let's move on. Do you know how?
So I'm not going to violate this norm of the rule of law. I'm not going to comment on an investigation that's ongoing.
Peter Navarro was indicted for contempt of Congress. Aren't you, in fact, in contempt of Congress when you give us this answer? This is an answer that's appropriate at a press
I mean-
conference. It's not an answer that's appropriate when we are
Mr.
asking
Massey
questions.
has a
We
really
are
good
the
question there.
committee that is responsible for your creation, for your
I
existence
mean-
of your department. You cannot continue to give us these answers. Aren't you, in fact, in contempt of Congress when you refuse to answer?
Congressman, I have the greatest respect for Congress. I also have the greatest respect for the
Refusing
Constitution and
to
laws of the
answer.
United States. The protection of pending investigations and ongoing investigations, as I briefly discussed in another dialogue a few moments ago, goes back to the separation of powers, which gives to the executive branch the sole authority to conduct prosecutions. It's a requirement of due process and respect for those who are under investigation, the protection of their civil rights. So
Well,
it's
with
nothing to
all
do
due
for
respect,
Congress.
with all due respect to that, Iran-Contra was an ongoing investigation, and that didn't stop Congress from getting the answers. And you're getting in the way of our constitutional duty. You're citing the Constitution. I'm going to cite it. It's our constitutional duty to do oversight. Now, in that video, that was your answer to a question to me 2 years ago, when I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol, and how many went into the Capitol. Can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, last time, you
A
don't know
lot
how
more
many there
than
were
that
or
you
there
said
weren't.
last time.
I don't know the answer to either of those questions. If there were any, I don't know how many. I don't know whether there are any.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any. You want to say that again? That you don't know that there were
I have
any?
no personal knowledge of this matter. I think what I said the last time.
You've had 2 years to find out. And the day, by the way, that was in reference to Ray Epps. And yesterday you indicted him. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence on a misdemeanor? Meanwhile, you're sending grandmas to prison. You're putting people away for 20 years for merely filming. Some people weren't even there yet. You got the guy on video who's saying go into the Capitol. He's directing people to the Capitol before the speech ends. He's at the site of the first breach. You've got all the goods on him, 10 videos, and it's an indictment for a misdemeanor. The American public isn't buying it. I yield the balance of my time to Chairman Jordan.
May I answer the question?
I'm going to ask you one now. We'll let the gentleman. Go ahead, but
in discovery, in the cases
There wasn't a
were
question.
filed with respect to January 6, the Justice Department prosecutors provided whatever information they had about the question that you're asking. With respect to Mr. Epps, the FBI has said that he was not an employee or informant of the FBI. Mr. Epps has been charged, and there's a proceeding, I believe, going on today on that subject.
The charge is a joke. I yield to the chairman. The time the gentleman has expired. The
Oh.
chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Attorney General, my colleague just said that you should be held in contempt of Congress. And that is quite rich because the guy who's leaving the hearing room right now, Mr. Jordan, is about 500 days into evading his subpoena. About 500 days. So if we're going to talk about contempt of Congress, let's get real. I mean, are you serious that Jim Jordan, a witness to one of the greatest crimes ever committed in America, a crime where more prosecutions have occurred than any crime committed in America, refuses to help his country, and we're going to get lectured about subpoena compliance and contempt of Congress? Jim Jordan won't even honor a lawful subpoena? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's no credibility on that side. Mr. Attorney General, you are serious. They are not. You are decent. They are not. You are fair.
Yeah, just like you.
They are not. So I
Just
welcome
like
you
you
to
and
the law firm
your
of
little
Insurrection LLP,
friend.
where they work every single day on behalf of one client, Donald Trump. And they do that at the expense of millions of Americans who need the government to stay open, who want their kids safe in their schools, and would like to see Ukraine stay in the fight so that we don't help Russia. That's the expense that this nonsense, this clown show, I call it a clown show, except they actually have real responsibilities that affect real Americans.
Right, because you can't
It's the difference between
call
one side
them
that
clowns
believes
when you're
in
clowns
governing
yourself.
and one side that believes in ruling.
Pointing out somebody else's hypocrisies when you're showing them yourself is just
And was
that.
told that he couldn't have his lawyer present.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Jordan
Swalwell.
tells all of us he knows so much about the Constitution, wouldn't afford one of your employees one of the basic constitutional rights to have a lawyer present. In fact, they threatened to call the Capitol Police and arrest a lawyer that was brought. Are you familiar with that standoff that occurred last week, Mr. Attorney General?
Generally, yes.
Well, your office also sent a letter detailing it, that you were willing to comply, but you'd like him to have a lawyer, and I'd like to submit that to the record with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Who appointed Mr. Weiss?
Mr. Trump was the last person who appointed Mr. Weiss to the position of U.S. Attorney. I appointed him to the position of Special Counsel last month.
Who initially appointed John Durham?
Mr. Durham was, I believe, also appointed by President Trump, and Mr. Barr appointed him as Special Counsel.
And again, these guys are so upset that Donald Trump's appointed prosecutors aren't doing enough of the corruption that Donald Trump wants them to do. So either they are just following the law, or they're not as corrupt, and they're not willing to go as far as they think that Donald Trump deserves. That's what they're asking to happen here.
What?
Also, doesn't it seem that they want it both ways when it comes to the special counsel?
That's hyperinflation.
Suggested that the special counsel
What the
should be
fuck was
independent,
that?
But when they didn't like the direction of the special counsel, you were asked why you didn't interfere more or involve yourself more or investigate more. Did you get that sense that
It's because he's
kind
the
of stuck
boss.
here?
He's supposed to pay attention to what they're
When I
doing.
make an appointment, somebody be special counsel or prosecutor, the appointment is without respect to what the outcomes of the case will be.
Your office has made a number of reforms to 702, targeting foreign nationals, but those reforms have not been put into law. 702 is also one of the best weapons we have to go after fentanyl. Can you tell us if you would support putting some of those reforms into law so we don't have to live administration to administration to see if they're going to be followed?
I would. Section 702 provides us with the greatest amount, at least the Justice Department, every morning, the greatest amount of intelligence that we receive about dangerous threats to the United States.
From foreign nationals?
From foreign nationals. I am quite aware and sensitive to civil liberties concerns with respect to the
To all
queries.
150
For
countries
that
that are
reason,
flooding across the southern border?
Put into place and I extended some of those that Mr. Barr had begun at the end of his term, and I put further ones in place. Those have led to a dramatic reduction in the number of queries and a dramatic reduction in the number of non-compliant queries. I believe those
You
are
dang
appropriate
well.
reforms.
But the
And I would be in
number of
favor
people,
codifying them, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. and
the
Thank you for
number
coming
of people
and
that
doing
have
something
poured
the chairman
across
is
that
unwilling to do.
southern border
Justify the
in
Congress.
mass
Yield back.
Gentleman yields
is a
back to the
huge
chair now.
number that it
Recognizes the
is.
Gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Isn't coming from
August
150
11,
different
2023,
countries.
you appointed Mr. David Weiss, U.S. Attorney for the
If you
District
think
of
it's
Delaware,
only coming
as
from
special
3
counsel overseeing
countries,
the
you're greatly
investigation of Hunter Biden.
mistaken.
I don't think the question has been asked
They've
yet.
been coming
Why
from
did you choose to
several
appoint him as special counsel?
150
The explanation was
different
given,
countries.
and to the extent I can give I'm permitted to give an explanation, is the one I gave and sent to the Congress, which is that Mr. Weiss requested it, that I had promised to give him all the resources that he need, that he had reached the stage of the investigation where he thought it would be appropriate And under those extraordinary circumstances, I thought the public interest would be served by making him special counsel.
How did Mr. Weiss's name emerge? Who recommended him? How was it brought to you or presented to you that this would be the best person to be the special counsel?
No, I'm not going to get into internal discussions. Mr. Weiss asked that he be appointed as
Swalwell's
special counsel.
gone. He's definitely
I
gone.
granted that request and made him special counsel, but I'm not going to get into internal deliberations in the Justice Department.
But I think you said earlier you've had no discussions with the White House and certainly the president in regards to that. Is that accurate?
Of course.
There were no suggestions that came from any other level of government on Mr.
Nothing came from the White House. That's right.
So on August 20th, 2023, the Washington Post article claimed that Mr. Weiss worked with Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's late brother, Beau Biden. Were you aware that there was a relationship there with the Biden family?
I'm not familiar with this. I don't know when he did what.
They worked together on legal cases in prior years. You were unaware of that?
I'm not familiar with that.
And the article claims it would have been inevitable for Mr. Weiss and the president to cross paths in a state like Delaware. They knew each other. There was a relationship there, but you were unaware of any of this before you appointed him?
I'm unaware of this, but attorneys who are in practice certainly get to know people. It's very difficult anywhere in the country for attorneys not to get to know attorneys on other sides of matters.
You said previously that Mr. Weiss had the ultimate authority over the investigation of the president's son, including prior to his appointment as special counsel. And you stand by that statement, I'm sure?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Just that in fact, there was that the ultimate authority was still there with Mr. Weiss to make determinations on that case.
You mean still as special counsel? Yes.
Special counsel. So the buck stopped there, and that's been determined. According to whistleblower testimony, Mr. Weiss deputy AUSA Leslie Wolf objected to search warrants of President Biden's guest house, denied investigation access to a storage unit containing all the documents from the vacated office of the law firm. Is Leslie Wolf still employed by the Department of Justice?
I'm not going to talk about any individuals in the Justice Department. As I said before, singling out individuals has led to a serious threat to their safety. I will say that the supervisor of this investigation was Mr. Weiss. He's responsible for all the decisions that were made. Excuse me. Many of the things that you're saying occurred during the previous administration. I apologize.
Okay. Well, there was absolutely a discussion by Leslie Wolf that if they told investigators or got involved with this, that there would ultimately be issues. You still believe that at this point that the entire investigation has moved in the correct discretion, was handled by the correct discretion of the individuals involved?
Mr. Weiss was a longstanding career prosecutor who was appointed by President Trump. He has an outstanding reputation, and I have confidence that he will proceed as appropriate. And at the end of his investigation, he will submit a public report, just like Mr. Durham, just like Mr. Mueller. He will be available for you to ask him questions about why he did various things that were done.
I yield the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garland, what changed? On July 10th, 2023, David Weiss wrote to Senator Graham and said, "I have not requested special counsel designation."
I mean, some people just really, some of the stuff that they put in there, as exciting as you want it to be,
Several days before my announcement,
just can't be.
3 days, Mr. Weiss
There's nothing
asked to
that
become
I could have
special counsel.
done
He explained that there were he had reached the
to
stage
make
of his
that any
investigation
more
where he thought that
exciting.
appropriate.
What stage is that?
Other than making
him the
that
resources he needed.
What stage is that? He'd reached the stage. After 5 years, what stage are we in? Are we in the
exponentially
beginning stage, the
longer.
middle stage, the end stage, the keep hiding the ball stage? What stage are we in?
I think this one I would go back to the videotape where I said I'm not permitted to discuss ongoing investigation.
Well, isn't that convenient? Something changed in 31 to 32 days from July 10th to August 11th. I think it's too brave. Whistleblowers came forward and a judge called BS on the plea deal. You guys tried to get past them. That's what I think happened. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Oh,
Thank
isn't
you,
that
Mr.
something?
Chair. The House Judiciary Committee has the responsibility of helping to ensure the rule of law. Unfortunately, this committee's chairman ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena. The horrible precedent set by this chairman has damaged the credibility of all congressional committees in seeking information from witnesses and damaged the rule of law. Attorney General Garland, thank you for your public service and thank you for being here today. I'd like to start by showing a video of January 6th, and then I'm asking some
Nice,
questions about that.
nice call out, dude.
Hey, brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in June.
Multiple capital injuries. Multiple capital injuries.
Just a couple of them.
Sharpened objects, missiles to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks.
The small couple videos that they showed, just the ones that they've already been released to you, the public, for what it is. So, for them to continuously show just that over and over
I'm going
again,
to state two facts. The people who showed up on January 6th to attack the nation's capital stopped Congress from certifying the fact that Donald Trump lost the election. Those two facts were so horrible that some in the right-wing media and some Republican members of Congress could not handle that, so they made up.
remember, we're not refuting anything. We're
Donald
just
Trump
listening
called
to what these
January
people
6th
have to
a beautiful day.
say.
He said the people who showed up had love in their hearts. Republican member of Congress said January 6th
And
was like a normal tourist visit. And some
trying to
Republicans
give
have said there were
commentary.
no weapons used on January 6th. Attorney General Garland, were there weapons used in the attack on January 6th?
Yes, in the video, you already saw some of the weapons.
The theory is
You-
that
you've
Secretary
already
Some
seen
Case
it.
was sentenced
You
to
already
attack
seen
on
it.
FBI agent.
It's all exactly the same
And on
as,
January,
as
Trump
you
will
know
party
it,
in
as
mass
you've
to attack on the
discovered,
FBI agent.
No.
if you've
In
gone
fact, it was
as you've
Donald
gone
Trump
through
sentenced to 22 years
and concluded
because he told them to stop the steal. Being those
that
up here,
Donald Trump
denied
is
the
the
ability to bring
worst.
charges against testified before the Senate Appropriations Committee that Mr. Weiss was free to run the investigation without interference from the DOJ. According to the IRS whistleblower, there was a meeting in October of 22 where Mr. Weiss said that he was not the deciding official on whether charges were filed. And we know that because we have handwritten notes from the IRS whistleblowers that was confirmed in an email to people in the meeting. Later in January, Mr. Weiss was denied the ability to bring charges again against Hunter Biden in the Central District of California. You testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee in March of this year that he had full authority. That Weiss confirmed that to us in a letter in June, that he had been granted, quote, full authority over this matter. But then he kind of backed up. In June 30th, he said, well, just kidding. My charging authority is geographically limited to my home district in Delaware. And of course, you appoint him as special counsel. So why the heck has his story changed so many times over the course of these investigations?
Congressman, I've seen all the three letters. I've read them quite carefully. They are all consistent with each other. And I urge everyone watching this on television or anyone who's interested to look at those three letters. They are not inconsistent with each other, and there's no change in the story.
So, but you agree that he had, and you've said this publicly, that he had ultimate authority prior to the
Three
appointment of
letters.
special counsel.
I've explained this repeatedly here. I've explained this in another proceeding. I said that Mr. Weiss would have the authority to bring a case in any jurisdiction in which he wanted to, and Mr. Weiss has confirmed that he would have that authority. I explained that if he had to bring a case in another jurisdiction, as a matter of mechanics, it would require me me or a delegatee of mine to sign a 515 order. That is very common.
But Mr. Attorney General,
there was nothing stopping that from happening.
Forgive me for a second, though, but that's when you say you have ultimate. When he wrote a letter on your behalf, I have ultimate authority. This is prior to the designation of special counsel.
That sounded a
Ultimate
little
to me
weird.
means like that you can go wherever you want to.
Ultimate
Because
means
word
when-
that he made up.
Sir, could he file
I don't think
charges
that
in the
was his
District of South
word.
Carolina? He would not have that ability, correct? He would have to
I
go
don't think
through
that was his
US
words.
attorney.
I think that was something different.
All he would have to do is ask me for 515 authority, and I would sign it right away, just like when he asked me to be special counsel. Within 3 days, I signed that.
So he didn't have ultimate authority.
He had the authority because I promised that he would have the authority.
But he did not have that authority. See, here's where I'm going. If he was denied the ability to bring charges in March of 22 in the District of Columbia, if he was denied the ability to bring charges in January of 23 in the Central District of California, that's not full authority. These U.S. attorneys operate as gatekeepers, so that's not full authority to do much of anything. And you know what's remarkable to me? We sit here and we look at this, and his story has changed so many times. You know whose story hasn't changed? Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, the emails that confirm that he said, I'm not the deciding person on whether charges are filed. And you know what the response back was from his colleague at work? Yep, you covered it all, Gary. That is consistent. What Mr. Weiss has done is this shell game and saying that he has authority, he doesn't have authority, but these gatekeepers at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia and in the Central District of California, they would have the gatekeeping authority on whether charges are brought in their jurisdictions.
I'm sorry,
Absent that designation, correct?
Those words have no meaning. Gatekeepers, et cetera. Mr. Weiss said he was never denied authority. I'm the one with the authority to decide who can prosecute in a different jurisdiction, and I promised that he would have that authority. I do not see any inconsistency here. I was not at the meeting that Mr. Shapley was referring to. I know what I guaranteed, and I know what Mr. Weiss has said I guaranteed.
It sounds a little bit like
It's a simple
gatekeeping.
question. If he already had it, why does
Just
he
a
need
little
it?
bit.
That's the question. You said in your statement on August 11th, you said he will continue continue to have the authority to bring charges where, when, and wherever he decides. So how can he continue to have a power that you just gave him? That's the fundamental question the gentleman from South Carolina was asking. If he already had it, why does he need it?
And I tried to answer that he had the authority and he continued to have
When
the
did he
authority.
specifically ask you? Did you tell him ahead of time that he could get 515 status anytime? When did you tell him that he could get that if he requested it?
I made absolutely clear.
No, when? Did you tell him at the start of the
I made
investigation?
clear from the beginning in my statements to the Senate that he would have the authority to make any decisions that he wanted to and bring prosecutions he thought were appropriate.
The gentleman from South Carolina expired. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Garland, thank you for your tremendous service to this country. As somebody who was trapped in the gallery on January 6th, I have to admit it's still hard for me to look at that video and imagine that that happened at our U.S. Capitol. And I'm deeply grateful that you have led this nation towards accountability of all those who were involved, including the former president. You have done so with full and complete attention to the facts, with a team around you that focuses on thorough investigation, and with a very clear mission that you've stated over and over and over again, despite the asked and answered on the other side, that the Justice Department works for the American people. This is a night and day transformation from a Justice Department that was constantly used by Donald Trump for his own political gain. And it is my firm belief that we have to hold those accountable who tried to destroy our country, including the former president, or we risk losing our country altogether. So I thank you for your steadfast leadership. It is just sad that this committee has also been transformed into a soapbox for political conspiracy theorists, instead of focusing on the really important issues that the American people care about. And so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to focus on the critical crisis of reproductive freedom and the efforts to try and strip reproductive freedom from people across this country. As you know, a decades-long project justices over as one upheld to abortion and west this country states where Republican reproductive or childbearing age. Washington State, my home, not only from neighboring restrictions are into the record and why patients from the freedoms are threatened by extreme initiate investigation. Stone. What has the department can take at home safe?
They authorized the use of mifepristone as safe and effective, and it did it back in 2000. That's been challenged first in the district court when we defended the FDA in that matter. There was an appeal in to the circuit court, which narrowed the district court's opinion in some ways, but allowed it to go forward in other. We have filed cert petition, which has been granted, I think, in the Supreme Court of the United States.
Very, very important work. Thank you. My home state of Washington has one of the highest rates of religiously affiliated hospitals in the country, with our state's insurance commissioner's office reporting that in 2021, there were several counties lacking even one secular hospital. This is an issue under the emergency medical treatment are denied law.
Federal for that work on, I think, a number of.
Thank you. Care must briefly right to
abortion
issue and to
briefly to your remarks regarding the before the Senate when you were confirmed and your promise regarding
some
Mr.
people
Weiss. Can you explain to us a little more detail who you promised that you would keep
just
Mr. Weiss
can't
on
be
this case?
handled
To whom was that promise made?
So a number of senators in my meetings with them asked me to make that promise. I think that was discussed in my interchange with a senator from Tennessee, I believe.
And did that promise that you made lead you to believe that even if that Mr. Weiss displayed a level of incompetence, that you would be precluded from asking him to step down or precluded from replacing him?
Look, when someone asked me to make this appointment, they didn't ask me depending upon what the outcome was. Mr. Weiss has made his appointment, decisions, and Mr. Weiss is an experienced federal prosecutor with extensive experience and with sufficient credibility to be appointed by President Trump. I just have no grounds for interfering here.
Right, so you haven't answered the question. The question was really what level of incompetence displayed by a prosecutor under your control would it take for you to make a change? But let's move on. The level of incompetence I'm referring to, I'll just read this to you. This is the same Weiss who headed an investigation that was trashed by whistleblowers who alleged that his investigation had been fixed from the outset. It's the same Weiss who ran an investigation in which agents were allegedly prevented from asking about Joe Biden, obstructed in their efforts to pursue questions, compromised by tip-offs to the Biden team on planned searches. It was the same Weiss who reportedly allowed the statute of limitations to run out on Hunter's major night on major who inked a wildly false and never been under review of
facts in this department, and I'm not in a position to comment on them.
Mr. Attorney General, welcome, and my friend and colleague, Victor Shokin.
The document that you're.
Who was Mr. Victor Shokin?
No.
Consistent with that, when you have a prosecutor said that they're going to, he wants to prosecute at least 2,000 people who are alleged to have committed a certain type of crime.
So look, I think you're referring to the January 6th question.
I'm just asking you, would that be consistent with your office's policy if somebody said, we're going to get up to 2,000 people on a particular crime? Is that consistent with your policy?
I think what that U.S. Attorney was referring to was a prediction for how many more cases would still be brought because the court had asked how many more people have
You filed a letter with the
identified.
court saying that we're looking at upwards of 2,000. We've got 1,200 more that we think we're going to get. So you don't do that for anything else, right? So you don't have anything like tax fraud. You're not saying, okay, we're going to have so many people that we want to get for tax fraud, so many people we want to get for
We don't
buying
have
federal firearms
quotas. If the
application.
court asks
They don't
us
have
what the
protocol.
likely workload will be based on prosecutions and investigations that are pending, the U.S. Attorney is obligated to respond.
Did you guys provide any reference of the number of people you thought you would prosecute who were involved in the 2020 summer riots of the burning of the Portland courthouse while there were still people inside those courthouses? You didn't ever file with the court or anything, say, oh, we think we're going to have another 300, 400, whatever it may be, because you didn't file those charges, did you?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. I believe that
I'm sure you're not.
the number that you're asking about was
Let me ask you this question.
projection that the court had asked the U.S. Attorney to make.
Let's switch topics. Maybe this one be easier to follow, I suppose. Is it the policy of the DOJ to provide advance notice to subjects before conducting a search for evidence?
It totally depends on the circumstance.
If the circumstance were that you had a guest house where the U.S. Attorney, Deputy U.S. Attorney saying, well, we know that we suspect there's a lot of evidence there, but we're not going to really follow that up. And calls the attorney from the other side saying, we were going to do a search warrant. Would that be consistent with your policy?
Okay, again, I know this is no hypothetical, and I don't know the facts of this case, and I don't know what happened, and I believe
Victor Shokin.
the document that you're
Who was Mr. Victor Shokin? So I got 3 minutes left.
Oh, come on now.
Not act. We were hoping you would. It's
Okay,
obvious you're not. I
let's
yield.
skip
Gentleman
up
yields
here a
back. The
little
gentleman
bit.
from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Mr. Attorney General, for joining us
There's a
and
couple
for
choice
your
spots.
patience with this questioning. I'm honored to represent a diverse community in North Carolina. Wake County has worked to welcome people of all backgrounds, ethnicities, and religions. The growth and success of my district in the Research Triangle Park depends on our commitment to celebrating the many cultures that contribute to our community. Unfortunately, over the past few years, these very communities that have contributed so much to my state and my district have found themselves under attack. Jewish leaders in my district have received threats to themselves and their synagogues as recently as last month. HBCUs across our state have locked down in response to bomb threats. Asian Americans in North Carolina and throughout the country have found themselves facing slurs and threats spurred in large part by the racialized language about the COVID-19 pandemic. The Southern Poverty Law Center reported in late 2020 that the number of white nationalist groups grew 55% between 2017 and 2019, noting that the rise
I mean,
in
they say
hate-based
you can
attacks
kind of talk about things
coincides
that you
with the
couldn't
growth
talk about
of the
before.
white nationalist movement.
You're a little
And
bit
the
more
Anti-Defamation
open.
League relatedly found that
it's
white
still,
supremacist propaganda incidents
do what's
occurred over
best for you.
14 times per day on
See your
average in
doctor.
2020, with a total of
I'm not a
5,125
doctor.
reported cases, nearly twice the number of cases reported
I
in
don't
2019,
necessarily
and
believe
the
in
highest
everything
number
that she
ADL
says
has ever recorded.
or anybody
This
else.
dangerous trend has continued in
Just
the last few
listening to it
years and
because
has
I didn't get
recently
a chance to
included
listen to it today.
as active clubs have been
See, I got a
increasing in
very
their
low
number and
concurrent viewer
prominence.
rate.
These active clubs started popping up
It
in
happens when
2020
some
and are a network of
things
white
other
nationalist
people are
groups
covering the
that
same
see
topic,
themselves as fighters in
and they're like,
training
"Oh,
for
they
an
can be a
ongoing
little
war
bit more
against the system they
interesting
claim is deliberately
to
plotting
keep me
against the
awake,"
white race.
or maybe I'll
As
just stay over
Attorney
here
General,
where
I
I
am
know for sure,
deeply interested
no
and
matter
concerned
what,
about the rise of these clubs, threats of violence,
Koolfrogg will
and
put me
actual
to
violence,
sleep.
and wanted to know if you're familiar with these activities and what your department is doing to counteract them.
I'm not familiar with the
'Cause that's what
specifics of
happens.
those clubs, and
That's
I will
what
certainly
happens.
look into what the department's doing in that respect. Very soon after I came into the department, I saw the spike in hate crime threats that were being made and in actual acts of violence. I directed the department to develop a strategy for responding to that.
I'm
For
really
3 days
happy
later,
I
that was
got
pretty
3
much
people,
coincident with Congress's passage of the
4 people over on Rumble,
No Hate Act.
really showing up for this.
And we have now
I
fulfilled,
really,
think, all
I
of the
wanted to see what it would
obligations under
do.
that act. We have task
And
forces
it
set
seems
up
that there's an
to
awful lot of
investigate and
people.
prosecute hate crimes, both as hate crimes and where they satisfy the requirements as domestic violence against people who have to carry them. Prosecution pending in the Tops grocery store.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your efforts in this regard. Also saw, and I'd like to know how your office is counteracting any cyber attacks and dealing with people who perpetrate.
Yeah, so we are vigilant to the risk of these kind of cyber attacks. In that case, these were criminal gangs affiliated in Russia, resident in Russia. Fortunately, we had available intelligence from Section 702, which we were discussing a little bit earlier today. I have to say that's one of the principal sources of our ability to fight.
That's where they are. That's all. That's
whether they are
just
criminal or
Russia.
whether they are launched
Nowhere
by a
else.
nation
Russia's
state,
the enemy.
whether
Russia's
they are,
Russia's the bad.
attempting to get
Russia.
ransomware
It's
and
all
pay ransom,
Russia.
whether they're simply
Russia.
trying or also
It's been
simply
Russia.
trying
It's
to
been Russia
exfiltrate
for
our
a long
information,
time.
or whether they're trying to prevent our computers from working at all. The Justice Department has established a cyber task force for this purpose, a ransomware task force, and we.
I'm Simon, and then we got a majority conference. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Attorney General, welcome. And my friend and colleague from Colorado outlined your option one is, but in that case, if they
Good,
was
look,
executed,
you
did
ready?
so, and
You ready
that
to
you did
dance? Is that what's going on?
that in your conference room, you have a portrait of Elliot Richardson. And the reason you have a portrait of Elliot Richardson, independent from the United States, and make you put that portrait there soon after you became attorney, same way that others that have so much, is because, and tell the president, for General, you're unable to answer some questions here for U.S. Attorney. Yeah, U.S. Attorney Hunter Biden investigation. A Democrat to slow walk this investigation. If you had made the same decision a year, said that you were interfering with become special counsel, could have criticized you because it could lead the investigation and puts the decisions to be made until could have acts the Trump guy. But speaking of reference, only supports legislation to prohibit say who they are. But I'm arming this Congress for 5. They spent 2 months bills, and now we do nothing in this Congress to try to deal with that very serious issue. In fact, there are.
A couple months ago in sworn testimony implicated you in a sweeping abuse of power.
Are the time
Give them a heads up.
you spoke on the subject? Report and I called on the file.
Them to do. Now, this is with respect to.
Or what? To criminally investigate.
Threats against law enforcement officials, institutions, and companies.
Folks from D.C. The response from the DOJ lawyer: "No, Your Honor, we haven't." An investigation that curtailed attempts to interview Mr. Biden by giving the transit team secret a heads up.
So they bullet marked
Mr. Biden's defense counsel about a
6
search warrant, an investigation run by Mr. Weiss,
7 different places.
run by Mr. Weiss, where they told the Congress 3 different stories in 33 days. They told this committee on June 7th.
Let's listen
David
to
Weiss
the
said, "I have
last bit
ultimate authority to determine when,
and to
where,
see
and
if
whether
they
to
were
bring charges."
anything better
23 days later, June 30th, he told
than
this
what
committee,
was really bullet marked.
"Actually, I can only bring charges in my U.S. Attorney's District, the District of Delaware." And then to further confuse matters, on July 10th, he told Senator Graham, "I have not sought special counsel status. Rather, I've had discussions with the Department of Justice." An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that negotiated a plea deal that the federal
Do
district court
better.
declined to accept. A plea deal so ridiculous.
All of them.
The judge asked
All
this
of
question,
them need to do better.
quote, "Is there any precedence for agreeing not to prosecute crimes that have nothing to do with the
Gives
charges
me
being
better
charged?"
content
Response from the
when they
DOJ
do
lawyer,
better.
"I'm not aware of any, Your Honor." A plea deal so ridiculous that the judge also asked, "Have you ever seen a diversion agreement where the agreement not to prosecute was so broad that it encompasses crimes in a
Help
different
me,
case?"
help you,
Response from the DOJ
help
lawyer,
me.
"No, Your Honor, we haven't." An investigation run by Mr. Weiss that not only had a
Help
sweetheart
you.
deal rejected, but according to the New York Times, there was an even sweeter deal, an earlier deal, a deal in which Mr. Biden would not have to plead guilty to anything. 4.5 years and all that, and now we get a special counsel. Now we get a special counsel, and who does the Attorney General pick? David Weiss, the guy who let all that happen. He could have selected anyone. He could have picked anyone inside government, outside government. He could have picked former attorney generals, former special counsels, but he picks the one guy he knows will protect Joe Biden. He picks David Weiss. And here's what the AG said in his August 11th announcement of David Weiss as a special counsel. Quote, "I am confident that Mr. Weiss will carry out his responsibility in an even-handed and urgent manner." Urgent manner, every witness we've talked to. The 2 FBI whistleblowers that came forward, Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, the 2 FBI agents on the case, Mr. Sobocinski, Ms. Hawley, they've all said this thing was anything but urgent. The FBI said they were frustrated at the pace. Ms. Hawley said she was frustrated at the pace. And of course, the IRS agents, they said the investigation was slow-walked. And even-handed, they limited the number of witnesses that could be interviewed. They tipped off the defense counsel about a subpoena. The judge says the plea deal was a joke. And all that's just half the story. There's one investigation protecting President Biden. There's another one attacking President Trump. Justice Department's got both sides of the equation covered. Look at the classified documents case.
He's
Spring and early
not
summer of last
wrong.
year, The Department of Justice asked President Trump to
Jim
turn over boxes of
Jordan's
documents.
pretty
He does just
pretty
that.
much right on the
In the process,
spot.
President Trump finds 38 additional documents. He tells the Department of Justice.
He knows
very next day, the
exactly
FBI
what
comes to
he's
his home,
getting
and he
at.
turns them over. Then the Department of Justice asked the president to put any boxes he brought from the White House to his home in his storage room and secure it by locking it. He does that as well. Everything they asked him to do, he did. And then what's the Justice Department do? August 8th, last year, they raid President Trump's home. And according to the FBI agent, Stephen D'Antuono, the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office, the search was a complete departure from standard protocol. When we interviewed Mr. D'Antuono, he said, first, the Miami field office didn't do the search. Instead, they sent folks from D.C. He said there was no U.S. attorney assigned to the case. Instead, it was run by D.C., in particular Jay Bratt, who's now on the special counsel
Yeah,
team.
you know,
He
and
said the
Jim
FBI
Jordan
didn't get President Trump's
repeated
counsel's
himself
approval
on
before
this.
they did the search. And then Mr. D'Antuono told us he had recommended that when the FBI got to Mr. Trump's home, the Attorney General name is IRS, Donald, only to have the Supreme Counsel. A number of questions on these two investigations later in the hearing.
Gravity of the matters that are before the department. But singling out individual career public servants
Should we
who are
dance?
just doing their jobs is
Should we
dangerous,
dance?
particularly at a time
Should
of
we kick
increased threats
yourselves
to the
out of
safety public
this
servants and their families.
this
We will
funk,
not be intimidated. We will do our
this
jobs
nasty
from outside
funk
influence,
that
and we
this
will not back down from the
C-SPAN, Merrick Garland testimony trash has brought us to. Close that out. Just stop it. Just be like, done. Done. No more. Can't do it. Can't do it. Won't do it. And okay. So there's one other thing that I was going to cover. It's going to go and I was going to put this over on Rumble exclusive. Now this is Matthew Perna. This is Matthew Perna. It's a little bit of a it's a short video, and I know I made it a watch night because I was thinking, yeah, whatever, we'll try it. We'll see if we can't make it a thing. Well, I just so happened to decide to watch something everybody else is already watching. It happens, but this maybe not. This may be a little bit different for you. So you bring yourself over to the Rumble side. We'll go ahead. We're going to shut the YouTube side of things down. We're going to go watch this video. This should be hopefully a little bit more interesting for what it is. I love y'all on the YouTube side. Thank you for being here. You can go hit that Rumble up and go check it out. We're going to continue on with some other stuff. This is, again, Matthew Perna stuff. So if you don't know who Matthew Perna is, maybe you should come check us out. And we're going to kick out of here. Again, I appreciate y'all. I'll see you tomorrow.
People aren't buying at CNN, you dumb bastards. They're not buying it.